Chapter 291. Zhang Cheng stood at the door for about a quarter of an hour. The first person to walk out was none other than the famous Jaina Proudmoore. The most outstanding female mage of the new generation of Azeroth looked exhausted. She seemed to be in pain and self-reproach. It was obvious that the disappearance of Varian Rin was a huge blow to her, especially since the already fragile peace agreement between the Alliance and the Horde was now gone. No matter who the mastermind was, the higher-ups of Stormwind City would first put the blame on Thrall. For Jaina, who saw the peaceful coexistence of the two factions of Azeroth as her life's work, this was like pouring a bucket of ice water on a hot summer day. Her mind was in a mess. She even kept thinking about what she had done wrong. Could it be that her father, Admiral Dai Lin, had done the right thing? Were the Alliance and the Horde destined to only stop when one side destroyed the other? Zhang Cheng sensed Jaina's inner turmoil and didn't say anything. He just bowed out of respect for Jaina's magic skills. Not long after Jaina left, Matthias Shore also walked out of the meeting room. However, he didn't seem to be as worried as Jaina. Instead, he stopped and looked at the young mage standing at the door. After a full minute, he suddenly smiled and said, "I like you." Huh. Zhang Cheng was obviously stunned for a moment. He quickly took 2 steps back to keep a safe distance. Although he didn't think that this legendary assassin was a gay with bad thoughts, as a normal male, it was inevitable that he would feel uncomfortable when he heard another man say that he liked him. Haha, you seem a little nervous. Relax, I've heard that you've made great contributions in solving the magical plague, so I can't help but ask, what do you think about the special goods that the goblins are transporting to Booty Bay this time? Matthias Shaw asked with a half-smile. Looking at the terrifying eyes of the other party, Zhang Cheng suddenly understood the intention of this big boss to approach him. He quietly took out a small bottle of liquid that exuded a strange green light from his pocket and replied in a low voice. As far as I know, there are usually only 2 ways to transport so many dangerous items to the Undercity. One is the sea route, but because of the rampant pirates and murlocs, it's not safe to travel there. As for the second way, it's naturally across the Alterac Valley. My suggestion is to create an accident and completely ruin the reputation of the Forsaken. Accident? Matthias Shore's mouth curled up slightly, showing an interested expression. At the same time, he stared at the small bottle of unknown liquid that gave him a dangerous feeling. Yes, an accident. Zhang Cheng nodded without hesitation. I believe you should know that the Frostwolf clan lives in the Alterac Valley, and this clan has always had a very special status among the orcs. Even the great chief Sarna was from the Frostwolf clan. Think about it. If the plague that the Forsaken Royal Potion Guild researched caused the Frostwolf clan to suffer heavy casualties, how would the orcs, who occupy the dominant position in the clan, react? Interesting, very interesting. Matthias Shore took the bottle with a joyful smile on his face. No matter how silly he was at this moment, he understood the sinister intentions behind this plan. Firstly, once the magic plague spread among the Frostwolf clan, it would definitely weaken the power of the tribe in the eastern continent. Secondly, according to the personality of the orcs, they would definitely find out who the culprit was after suffering such a huge loss. Once they found out that the culprit behind all this was the Forsaken, there would definitely be an intense conflict between the 2 parties. It was not impossible that the alliance would be broken, and the Forsaken would be directly expelled from the tribe. Finally, and most importantly, the Forsaken had joined the Horde camp because of Great Chief Thrall's insistence. If the Forsaken did anything that harmed the interests of the Horde, then his personal prestige would take a hit. Many orc clans that didn't like him to begin with would start to play tricks in private. For the Alliance that was in a terrible fix, any plan that could cause chaos among the tribe was a good plan, especially this time when they only needed to send out a few elite assassin teams. Even if they failed, there wouldn't be any losses. Please note that the bottle contains something more dangerous than the plague. I'm not even sure what kind of unpredictable changes will happen when it comes into contact with the goods that the goblins are transporting. Zhang Cheng cautioned carefully. This was because the bottle of plague he took out was no longer the initial version that the Forsaken had researched. It was a version that had mutated after a series of killings in the Song of Ice and Fire world. The speed of infection was dozens or even hundreds of times faster than when Kel'Thuzad was still a human. It wouldn't take a few days at all. In about half an hour, all the residents of a city would be turned into undead. Matthias shrugged nonchalantly. Great. This is exactly what I wanted. In order to thank you for your contribution to the Alliance, I'll have someone send you a small gift later. I believe you'll like it. Thank you very much. If there's nothing else, I'll go in and see the Great Mage. After saying that, Zhang Cheng turned around to push the door open. But before he could do anything, Matthias stretched out his arm to stop him. At the same time, he probed with a polar voice. Have you heard of an organization called the Syndicate? What? Zhang Cheng suddenly felt his heart tighten. He pretended that he didn't know anything. Nothing. I'm just asking. Matthias seemed to have gotten the answer he wanted. He turned around indifferently and disappeared at the corner of the staircase. Looking at the other party's erratic back, Zhang Cheng couldn't help but take a deep breath and clean up the messy thoughts in his mind. Then, he went straight to the room and bowed to the Great Mage with one hand on his chest. Your Excellency, I've encountered some problems. I hope you can give me some pointers. Ansram Rinnever stood in front of the window and looked down at the rebuilding Dalaran. He asked without turning his head, Tell me, what problem can actually stump you? Please take a look. This is a meteorite I found in a mysterious place not long ago. It seems to contain some kind of powerful magical energy. Zhang Cheng took out a meteorite fragment the size of a fingertip as he spoke. Because the world of Azeroth was full of arcane energy, he was not worried about attracting the attention of the Great Mage. Instead, he hoped to get some advice or inspiration from the other party. Chapter 292. Magic Energy? Ansram Ruinvawal took the stone that exuded a faint red glow, and his eyes quickly showed a trace of curiosity and excitement. As an archmage, there were very few things in the world that could arouse his desire for research, but this small stone did it. The reason was very simple. The energy contained in the stone was completely different from the currently known arcane, nature, holy light, shadow, evil energy, and death. It was a mixture close to elemental energy, but not completely elemental energy. The most important thing was that this thing was a solid crystal of highly condensed energy. He had only seen the well water of the Sun Well, and had never seen the well water of the Well of Eternity. But, judging from the shape, he was afraid that the same volume of well water of the Well of Eternity did not contain as much magic energy as this small piece of meteorite. Of course, the amount was one thing, and the purity and utilization were another. Seeing that the meteorite fragment had successfully aroused the Archmage's desire for research, Zhang Cheng immediately struck while the iron was hot and said, Your Excellency, I have done some tests and found that the energy contained in it is very active. Especially the construction of elemental magic often requires only half of the arcane energy. But if it is used to construct other types of spells, it will be much more difficult, and there may even be serious mistakes. It sounds interesting. If I'm not mistaken, you have begun to extract this energy and store in your body, right? With that said, Ansram Ruinvawal looked away from the stone and looked up and down at the young man standing in front of him. There was no doubt that he, who was extremely sensitive to magic, would notice the extremely uncoordinated flow of magic on Zhang Cheng's body. It was as if his body was divided into two from the middle. The left half stored the arcane energy, and the right half stored the energy in the meteorite. Yes, Master. This energy can make elemental magic faster, more labor-saving, and more powerful. I think it can greatly improve my combat effectiveness. Zhang Cheng did not try to hide anything and admitted it generously. After all, the well water in the basement of his home was limited. As the mage's level increased, the consumption would increase, and it was not very convenient to carry it around. It could not meet his needs at all, so he urgently needed a replacement. The Archmage nodded gently. No need to explain, I understand. But I think the way you use this energy is still a bit too crude. Crude? Zhang Cheng frowned subconsciously. Yes, I really don't know how to describe you. Too smart? If you weren't smart enough, you wouldn't be able to find the trick to use another type of energy to release magic. Too stupid. If you're not stupid, how could you forget that all spells rely on a small amount of your own magic power, and then create a chain reaction when it resonates with the ubiquitous magic energy in the air? The Archmage gave a hint with a series of questions and answers. Resonance? Damn it. I actually forgot about this. Zhang Chang seemed to have suddenly understood something and slapped his forehead in annoyance. It was clear that he had made a mistake when he was studying the Song of Ice and Fire. He had been so eager to break through the limitations that he had forgotten that although magic power was important, it wasn't the only factor that determined a mage's strength. If he were to change his way of thinking and borrow the uniqueness of the Crimson Meteorite's energy, wouldn't he be able to make himself stronger by using less energy to trigger a stronger energy resonance? Looks like you've thought it through. That's right, the biggest use of this small stone isn't to replenish your mana, but to act as a resonance amplifier. Every elemental spell you cast will be strengthened several times through it. I have to say that this alone is enough to make any spellcaster crazy. Even an old guy like me is a little tempted. Now I'm curious, where did you get it? Ansram Ruinwilver probed meaningfully. Zhang Cheng hesitated a little and immediately replied in an ambiguous tone, "Sorry, Your Excellency Archmage, I don't know where I went. I found this redstone there. If you like it, I'll give it to you as a thank you gift." "Give it to me?" "Hee, it seems that you have a second or even a third or fourth one in your hands." "Forget it. Since you don't want to say it, I won't force you. However, I don't have the habit of taking advantage of others for no reason. This is my notebook before I became an Archmage, including some special casting skills, alchemy, and enchantment experiences. I'll give it to you as a return gift." After saying that, the Archmage took out a book with a yellowed page from the bookshelf behind him and threw it over. Just as Zhang Sheng was about to reach out to catch it, the notebook, which was only the size of a human face, suddenly began to expand. Then it became bigger and bigger. In the end, it was transformed from a harmless notebook into a lethal weapon that could smash a person to death. At this time, he didn't dare to catch it. He quickly turned sideways to avoid the path of the behemoth, letting it hit the ground heavily, making a loud bang. "Your Excellency, are you trying to kill me?" Zhang Cheng stared at the notebook that was only half a meter away from him with lingering fear, and the corners of his mouth kept twitching. Sorry, because it was too long ago. I forgot that this notebook was cast with a shrinking spell." Anselm Ruinviver had an awkward expression on his face. There was no way not to be embarrassed. Although there were many incidents of apprentices dying because of mentors' carelessness every year in Dalaran, if it was the Archmage who used a notebook to smash a promising young mage to death, it would inevitably cause a series of rumors. He didn't want to be the protagonist of countless people's discussion behind his back. "Yeah, it's nothing. Anyway, you didn't do it on purpose." Zhang Cheng sighed and admitted that he was unlucky. He bent down and tried to pick up the notebook that was as heavy as a box. When his fingers touched the cover, the notebook suddenly glowed with a purple arcane light, and then it shrank to its original appearance in less than a second. For the first time, he felt the magic of the shrinking spell. He immediately picked up the notebook and released several detection spells in succession. After a few minutes, he couldn't help but exclaim, "It's amazing!" With the help of arcane energy, the volume of the item is compressed according to a certain ratio, thus achieving the purpose of reducing the volume and weight of the item. When necessary, it can be enlarged to return to its normal state. Ha! That's the magic of magic, isn't it? Young man, don't just think about studying those powerful destructive spells all day long. If you have time, you should also study other applications of magic. Believe me, they are the true essence of the arcana, the key to the supreme temple. Anselm Ruiniverver suggested in an experienced tone. Chapter 293. There was no cover-up or lie. Zhang Cheng directly took out all the knowledge he had obtained from the Song of Ice and Fire World and Magic Earth to discuss and research with the Archmage. He was eager to draw inspiration and direction from the other party's profound magic attainments. Because he understood that he was a traveler, there was no need to hide all the knowledge he had obtained like a thief. Instead, He had to share selectively to get more research directions through sharing. What's more, according to the pitiful knowledge he had obtained at the moment, it was far from enough to attract the attention of a Dalaran archmage, so there was nothing to worry about. In this way, for the next half a month, Zhang Cheng and Ansram Ruinvawal stayed in the Mage Tower, constantly exchanging their understanding and views on magic. Although, as a beginner, Zhang Cheng's theoretical knowledge was far less robust than that of the archmage, he could always think from a different perspective and even make suggestions that made the other party's eyes light up. As they got to know each other better, Ansram Ruinvawal was surprised to find that the young man standing in front of him was not only an interfering sponge, crazily absorbing all kinds of knowledge, but also an explorer with great talent. He was walking a path that no Dalaran mage had walked before. Hungry and thirsty, never satisfied, he could not imagine at all how a little guy who should be immersed in enjoying love and material things would be willing to give up such intoxicating beauty and instead devote time and energy to endless learning. According to the experience and patterns of some of the older mages in Dalaran, young mages always had to go through some setbacks and hardships before they could truly calm down and understand the mysteries of magic research. The most simple example was Jaina Proudmoore. This young woman, who was known as the fastest-growing young woman in history, first triggered a fierce struggle between the young men. Even Kale, that's Sunstrider, who was known for his elegance and calmness, was unable to escape this calamity. Then she started a real relationship with Arthas, the heir of the kingdom of Lordaeron, until the other party ordered the slaughter of Stratholme, who was infected by the plague, to be completely separated. It could be said that Wizard Jaina's power had increased at an incredible rate. It was during this period that the Holy War in Hajar came to an end. She was already a powerful spellcaster who had surpassed her mentor, Antonidas. Anslam Muin even suspected that Zhang Cheng was stimulated by the death of his mentor Raisin, so he turned a blind eye to the young and beautiful female mages and apprentices around him, not to mention any gossip. Of course, his suspicions were just suspicions. He didn't say it out loud. At least in this dangerous environment, there was nothing more important than increasing his own strength. Devoting oneself wholeheartedly to a new research topic would always cause one to inadvertently neglect the passing of time. When the two of them finally figured out the combination pattern of the unknown magic runes after much effort, a sudden piece of bad news interrupted their enthusiasm for research. Sir Archmage, the latest news is that Lady Jaina has allied with the Horde and launched an attack on the undead scourge occupying the Razor Highlands. The Lich Amonir and his undead subordinates have been completely annihilated. A middle-aged mage who looked to be in his 40s reported expressionlessly. What? Is she crazy? Anslam Ryuin's eyes widened in disbelief. I don't know if Lady Jaina is crazy or not, but the Anti-Evidence Alliance is going crazy. Some people are even shouting that she doesn't deserve to be a member of the Alliance. The middle-aged mage smiled bitterly and put a piece of information on the table. Although Dalaran was not as pervasive as the MI7 of Stormwind City, it also had its own intelligence collection system. Anslam Ryuin picked it up and glanced at it. He quickly turned to Zhang Cheng and asked, "What do you think of this matter?" "What else can I think of it? I can only say that Lady Proudmoore is too naive in politics. She doesn't understand what her actions mean. It's just like when she joined forces with Thrall to kill her father, which led to the hostility of the entire kingdom of Kurtiris." Zhang Cheng spread his hands helplessly. To be honest, sometimes he really didn't understand how a proud lady who grew up in the palace didn't even have the most basic political knowledge. The great Taoist master nodded in agreement. "That's a straightforward evaluation. Jaina is indeed too naive. It doesn't match the power she has. But anyway, she is a member of the Kirin Tor Council. I have to deal with it personally. You plan to leave Dalaran?" Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Yes, I need to leave for a few days. Don't worry, Sylvanas may be blinded by hatred, but she is still a ranger general with a considerable strategic vision. She will not take the initiative to start a war at this time, let alone attack Dalaran." Anslam Yuen knew what Zhang Cheng wanted to express and waved his hand indifferently. Today, Dalaran had already passed the fragile reconstruction period. Just the earth, elementals, and arcane puppets that were no longer in the streets and alleys were enough to make any spies suffer, not to mention the endless stream of mages that were returning. Well, please go and come back early. Zhang Cheng roughly searched his memory and didn't find any attacks on Dalaran during this period, so he quickly let down his guard. You should also take this opportunity to have a good rest. Learning and research are not everything in life. You need to relax properly to not lose yourself. After saying this, Anselm Ruinviver quickly followed the unknown middle-aged mage and walked toward the location of the teleportation portal. After watching the two of them walk away, Zhang Cheng sighed with a smile. As a member of the Alliance, the first one to unite in the face of danger is actually the tribe. I'm afraid there is no second person who can do this except Jaina. Does she really have a story with Thrall that she has to tell? It's not a good habit to talk about others behind their backs, especially when talking about a lady who saved the world from the Burning Legion. With crisp footsteps, a high elf female with long silver hair rushed in from the open door. You are? Zhang Cheng cautiously took 2 steps back and looked at the other party with a scrutinizing gaze. Varnachinga, nice to meet you, young human mage. I don't know if you're free now. Let's discuss some skills about alchemy together. The female elf who called herself Varna raised her chin and showed the unique arrogance of the elves. Sorry, madam. I don't know you, and I don't want to have any interaction with you. If there is nothing else, please step aside. I'm going home. Chapter 294. Ha 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 ha. What did I just see? The famous Varna Morgenstern was actually rejected by a man? Not long after Zhang Cheng left, another female high elf mage in a purple robe slowly emerged from the air. Although most of the high elves had followed Prince Kael, and changed their names to blood elves, there was still a small number of them who did not agree with his extreme philosophy and still maintained the name of Quell Dorii. Most of the members who originally belonged to the Kirin Tor Council were unwilling to degenerate, to consume mana, to relieve the pain of the magic addiction. They had all returned to Dalaran to find another solution. Varna Morgenstern obviously knew her. She rolled her eyes in annoyance. Shut up, Edith. Don't tell me you didn't feel it. The human is emitting the smell of the Sunwell water. Of course I felt it. My sense of smell did not fail me. But you seem to be a little too direct. You scared our cute little guy away. The female high elf mage named Edith replied as she licked her lips gently. No high elf could resist the temptation of the Sunwell water. Even those who claimed that they had successfully kicked their magic addiction were no exception. The reason was simple. For the high elves, absorbing energy from the Sunwell had become an instinct engraved in their souls. It was even more terrifying than drug addiction. Just a little bit of well water was enough to trigger the most sensitive nerves in the depths of their subconscious. Then, they would be completely immersed in the extreme pleasure and unable to extricate themselves. Scared away? You underestimate this young man who could gain the favor of the great mage. Although I'm not too sure what kind of research they have been conducting these days. One thing is certain. His talent in a certain aspect is far beyond the scope of ordinary mages. Look at the traces left around these experiment tables. I can guarantee that this is definitely not an ordinary experiment. As she spoke, Varna Morgenstern stretched out her finger and gently stroked the alchemy table, carefully observing the strange powdery substance. So, don't forget that he is a member of the Kirin Tor Council like us. Things like love potions cannot be used. Edith pursed her lips and reminded meaningfully. Don't be fooled by the elegant and beautiful appearance of the high elves. These old fellows were at least 300 or 400 years old, and their cunning was not something that young mages or apprentices in their 20s or 30s could compare to. Ever since Dalaran had been established, there had been countless young men and women who had been used or toyed with by the elves. However, both parties were mostly willing parties, and Silver Moon City was the place where magic flourished the most after Dalaran, so the council could not interfere too much. But now, the few remaining high elves had parted ways with the blood elves who had left the alliance. Naturally, they had lost Silver Moon City as their backing, and could no longer do things as unscrupulously as before, let alone using the love potion to make the other party madly infatuated with him. He couldn't even casually use some charm spells. Otherwise, there was an 80% chance that he would be expelled. So what? Don't tell me you're going to give up the chance to get the water from the Sunwell. Damn it. Whenever I think of the pure, arcane energy, my body starts to heat up. Varna Mord crossed her arms in front of her chest and began to tremble uncontrollably. Her eyes were filled with deep desire. Edith's performance wasn't any better. She bit her lower lip and tried her best to suppress the restless magic in her body. Not long after, these two female high elven mages who were troubled by their magic addiction hugged each other. They kissed, hugged, and caressed each other, trying to use lust to distract themselves. Zhangqing obviously didn't know that the well water he carried with him had attracted the attention of the high elves. He was busy bringing Sophia, who was dressed as a nun, out of the magical barrier of Dalaran. Since he was a genuine Kirin Tor Parliament mage leading the way, the guards in charge of guarding the entrance did not pester them too much and chose to let them pass. After the two of them had walked a few kilometers, Sophia tore off her loose white robe and revealed the black tights she was wearing underneath. At the same time, she grumbled softly, "Damn it, he had finally escaped. I have to hurry back to Durnhold Castle and report to the Duke." "Oh, after going through so much, you still intend to stay in the Syndicate, an organization with no future?" Zhang Cheng asked with a faint smile as he admired her curvaceous figure. "Of course. I am the daughter of a noble of the Alterac Kingdom. Apart from a syndicate, is there any other place in this world that can accommodate me?" Sophia threw away her robe and retorted without even turning her head. "How can there be no other place? You have to understand that the person who gave the order to banish the nobles of the Alterac Kingdom was Terina's Menethil. But now, not only was he killed by his son Arthas, even the glorious Lord Darren Kingdom was destroyed. Do you think anyone would care about this order now? You have to completely let go of your past obsession and find a place to start a new life. Seeing that we've worked together before, I'll give you one last piece of advice. Leave the Syndicate, or you'll be in big trouble soon." After saying that, Zhang Cheng smiled and turned to walk in the direction of the Silver Pine Forest. There was no doubt that his destination this time was none other than the Shadow Fawn Castle that countless players were familiar with. To be more precise, he had his eyes on the Book of UR, which recorded a large number of shadow and summoning spells. Perhaps in the eyes of many, Erigel was just an insignificant character, but the author of the Book of UR was a rare genius in the Kirin Tor Parliament. Not only was he good at controlling and using shadow energy, he also had a deep understanding of the werewolf race. Zhang Qing wouldn't let go of such precious knowledge that he didn't have to fight against a powerful enemy, nor would he have to change the course of Azeroth's history. He also wanted to see if he could combine the blood of the werewolves of Azeroth with the blood of the werewolves of Magic Earth to create an even more powerful race for his own use. However, the most important part was the shadow magic recorded in the book, especially the part about absorbing shadow energy from the distortion of time and space. It was very similar to the warlock profession. With a thirst for knowledge and power, Zhang Cheng quickly passed through the border between the Silver Pine Forest and the Hillsbrad Hills and officially entered the so-called Horde territory. No one knew if it was because of the plague or some other reason, but this place that was once full of vitality was now shrouded in a mysterious fog. Even though the soil wasn't completely rotten like the plague, it wasn't much better. It had an unhealthy grayish color to it. Chapter 295. This feeling is terrible. After traveling north for 2 hours along the road originally built by the Lord Darren Kingdom, Zhang Qing finally felt a little exhausted. He found a place to sit down and rest for a while. In fact, with the Dark Knight profession, his stamina was not so bad that he would be out of breath just by walking. What really made him feel tired was the sense of oppression everywhere. If not for the fact that he was afraid of revealing his trump card, he even wanted to summon Kulo Kelba for transportation. He wanted to see what kind of incredible changes this dragon that was hatched from arcane energy would produce in Azeroth, which was filled with arcane energy. Unfortunately, before reaching the Shadowfawn Castle. He had to continue to endure. This was because he couldn't predict whether or not Ku Luo Kaba's appearance would trigger some unpredictable consequences. After all, in Azeroth, most dragons belong to one of the 5 Guardian Dragon Legions. Apart from the Fallen Black Dragon Legion and the Scourge Legion, anyone who wanted to create a new dragon out of thin air would have to bear the corresponding risks. As a spellcaster who was far from the level of a great wizard, Zhang Cheng did not want to clash with these terrifying monsters at all. Just as he was leaning against a tree and letting his imagination run wild, a tall shadow suddenly emerged from the depths of the forest. It was over 2 meters tall, had the head and limbs of a wolf and the body of a human. Its body was covered with white fur, and its 2 eyes flashed with a terrifying red light. There is no doubt that this was a powerful and dangerous giant werewolf. It emitted an extremely dangerous aura from within. As it was running too fast, Zhang Cheng did not have much time to react. He immediately raised his ice shield. The moment the white frost was formed, the werewolf brandished its sharp claws and charged forward, unleashing a flurry of attacks. Bang! 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 Its blade-like claws dug a large hole in the sturdy ice shield in the blink of an eye. Fortunately, in these few seconds, Zhang Cheng had already completed the spell in his hands. A super fireball that was many times larger than a normal fireball directly hit the werewolf's furry face with a loud bang. Boom! Ow! The werewolf had no choice but to give up on the prey in front of him. He scrambled and crawled a dozen meters away, desperately shaking the area where the flames were burning. There is no doubt that this wasn't a fireball spell, but a pyroblast spell that was known in the game as 1 shot into the soul and 2 shots into the sky. Normally, this spell required 11 points of fire talent to get the ultimate version of fireball, but with the help of the notes given by Anselm Ruinviver, he had mastered it by self-study. By the time the flames were extinguished, the werewolf's face was covered in horrifying burns. To be exact, half of its face had been completely carbonized by the high temperature and explosion, leaving only black bones. One of its eyes was also blind. If it weren't for the fact that werewolves had stronger physiques and powerful recovery abilities than ordinary humans, it would have been killed instantly. Zhang Cheng sighed in amazement as he stared into the wild eyes of his opponent. You're still alive after being hit by a pyroblast? Unbelievable. But it doesn't matter. I can use you to test my amplifier. Just as he finished speaking, the charm pocket watch hanging on his waist suddenly released a crimson light. Following that, the incantation filled with magic power once again echoed in the silent forest. This time, under the cover of the red light, the fireball was much larger than the last time, and it was dazzling golden. The werewolf seemed to be aware of the danger and immediately turned around and ran into the depths of the forest. But unfortunately, before he could run 20 meters, the huge golden fireball left his hand and hit his back. Boom! The suffocating heat wave lifted the unlucky guy into the air on the spot, and then he fell down with a bang. The aftermath alone burned all the flowers and trees within a radius of 5 or 6 meters. Smelling the pungent, burnt smell in the air, Zhang Cheng touched the pocket watch hanging on his waist and nodded with satisfaction. The power is amazing. The Great Wizard is right. As an amplifier for elemental spells, this is the most valuable use of meteorites. Just as he was about to get closer to check the werewolf's body, a crisp sound of horse hooves suddenly came from the north. About 2 or 3 minutes later, a cavalry with the violet eye emblem appeared at the end of the road. There were not many of them, less than 10 of them. Most of them were wearing armor, and there was no need to ask to know that they were warriors. There was only one youth with a staff, and he seemed to be a mage or an apprentice of the Kirin Tor Parliament. Who are you? What happened here just now? The leader of the warriors got off his horse and asked with a vigilant face. I am a mage from Dalaran, and I happened to meet a werewolf who wanted to attack me. That's all. Zhang Cheng took the initiative to show the ring that represented his identity. Werewolf. The warrior subconsciously turned around and glanced at the charred corpse that was still steaming, and his face quickly showed a very interesting expression. The youth with the staff immediately ran over and carefully checked the corpse that was almost unrecognizable. Finally, he stood up and shouted with a slightly trembling voice, It's the son of Erigel. He killed the son of Erigel. What? This is impossible. Holy light bless. Old Columburn's soul can finally rest in peace. For a moment, everyone fell into an unbelievable ecstasy. The young man with the wand in his hand dropped the corpse and quickly walked to the front. He placed one hand on his chest and bowed respectfully. Thank you, Master. You've helped us get rid of a thorn in our side. This monster killed 6 of our patrolling soldiers in half a month. My name is Bernice, and I am an apprentice stationed in Umbermill. The guards behind me were sent by Dalaran to resist the expansion of the Forgotten Ones. Umbermill? I see. There was a thoughtful look in Zhang Cheng's eyes. As everyone knew, in order to ensure the safety of Dalaran, Archmage Antrim Renoverver had sent a part of the army to the town of Umbermill in the southern part of the Silver Pine Forest as an outpost when the reconstruction began. Although there were not many of them, together with a local militia of more than 300 people, it was enough to resist small-scale attacks. Moreover, there were many farmlands around Umbermill that could still be cultivated, and the mines could still produce ores, providing Dalaran with all kinds of supplies. There was no reason to give it up. Sir, this is not the place to talk. If you don't mind, can you come back to Umbermill with us? We are in urgent need of the help of a powerful mage like you. The leader of the warriors gave Bernice a look and took the initiative to invite her. Chapter 296. Umbermill, a human town in the southeastern part of the Silver Pine Forest. Before the outbreak of the Scourge, this was one of the territories under the direct jurisdiction of the Magic Kingdom. The food, fruits, vegetables, and meat that the mages needed daily were all produced here. As Dalaran was not short of money, he did not impose too many taxes. The lives of the local farmers were quite good. They did not have to worry about being exploited by the nobles, bandits, or wild beasts. Under the protection of the mages, they even managed to avoid several wars with the orcs. It was simply a stroke of good luck. However, as the saying went, no matter how good one's luck was, there would always be a time when it ran out. When the plague broke out in the hinterland of the kingdom, the Silver Pine Forest, which was close to the capital of Lordaeron, was naturally not spared. In just a few weeks, terrifying ghouls, zombies, and skeletons swarmed in and swept through the entire northern part of the Silver Pine Forest. Fortunately, a group of patrolling militia discovered the undead army in advance and hurriedly informed the farmers scattered around the town to take refuge. Only then did they avoid the tragic fate of being slaughtered. Even so, there were still many old and weak who did not manage to escape into the walls of Umbermill in time. At present, there were more than 2,000 people living in this town. Most of them were young adults between the ages of 14 and 30. Due to the war, the proportion of the female population was about 2/3. Many of the armored militia on the walls were young girls in their 20s. Looking at the faces full of vigilance, Zhang Cheng quickly realized that the residents here were probably driven crazy by the wandering werewolves and the constant harassment of the Forsaken. If it were not for the guards of Dalaran, they would have abandoned the Silver Pine Forest and fled to the Hillsbrad Hills in the southeast. Although there were still strongholds of the Forsaken there, at least the sun was bright and there were no traces of the plague on the land. Just as Zhang Cheng was silently observing the situation in Umbermill, the mage apprentice Bernice rushed into a building that looked like a meeting hall. About 3 to 5 minutes later, she came out with a man in his 50s with long black hair and a beard. Archmage Zhang Cheng keenly noticed the violet ring on the man's finger that symbolized his identity, and a surprised expression appeared on his face. It should be known that the archmages of the Kirin Tor Council were not weeds on the roadside. Every one of them had knowledge and power that matched their status. Since the establishment of Dalaran until now, there were no more than 100 people who could obtain the title of Archmage. Although their status might not be comparable to the members of the Council of Six, they were all elites who stood at the forefront of magic. He did not understand why Anselm Ruinwevel would be willing to send a great wizard to such a remote place when Dalaran was in dire straits. What? Are you surprised, young man? The unknown great wizard teased with a smile. Shouldn't I be surprised? Zhang Cheng shrugged and asked. Ha 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 ha. All right, I admit that my appearance in Umbermill is rather surprising, but I believe you should be able to feel that this place is different from an ordinary rural town. After saying that, the Archmage raised his hand and gently stirred the air twice. In an instant, a strong energy vortex began to form under his control. Seeing this scene, Zhang Cheng's pupils suddenly shrank, and he asked in a somewhat incredulous tone, "There's an energy node nearby?" As the name suggested, an energy node was the place where the magical energy overflowed from under the feet of the planet called Azeroth. It was a bit like an underground fountain. The well-known Well of Eternity and Sunwell were, to some extent, a type of energy node. As long as it was near an energy node, spellcasters would often find it easier to replenish their energy, and the power of their spells would also change to varying degrees. That's right. There's an energy node near Umbermill, which is why I chose to stay here. Oh, right. I almost forgot to introduce myself. My name is Adaric. Nice to meet you. The great wizard who called himself Adaric took the initiative to extend his right hand. Nice to meet you too, Your Excellency, Great Wizard. Zhang Cheng also extended his right hand and shook the other party's hand. After hearing the other party's name, he recalled that the tribe seemed to have a series of quests related to Umbermill in the Silver Pine Forest, and the last step of which was to kill the great wizard named Adaric. Of course, a game was a game, and reality was reality, let alone a group of living dead that had just crawled out of their graves. Even if the Forsaken in the Silver Pine Forest came out in full force, they might not necessarily be able to force the great wizard to use his full strength. So until the Undercity decided to launch a full-scale expansion, Umbermill had always been safe. All right, don't just stand there. It's not the place to talk, especially in the past 2 days. I don't know what the Forsaken are up to, but they actually sent elite thieves to sneak into the town. I don't know what they're up to, Adaric said as he led the way into the house. Other than Bernice, the rest of the patrol team did not follow. They all went to the stables to hand over their mounts to the horse breeder and then hung the body of the son of Erigel on the city wall to boost the morale of the troops. After passing through the council hall, the three of them quickly came to a spacious room filled with supplies. The burning fireplace in the corner dispelled the cold and damp outside, giving them an indescribable sense of warmth and comfort. Adaric found a chair and sat down, then looked at Zhang Cheng with a scrutinizing gaze. After a full minute, he asked, "I heard from Bernice that you're looking for information about the Shadowfawn Castle." "Yes, Master. I hope to take back the Book of UR for the Council. You should know best that such dangerous and precious knowledge should never fall into the hands of Erigel. Otherwise, if the Forsaken were to get their hands on it, the consequences would be unimaginable." Zhang Cheng purposely pretended to be a righteous messenger to hide his true purpose. "Of course I understand, but the problem is, the reason why the Silver Pine Forest can remain peaceful is because Erigel has taken over the Shadowfawn Castle and blocked the attack of the Forsaken for us. As long as the living dead have not taken over the Shadowfawn Castle, they won't dare to move south easily. Otherwise, they'll face the danger of being attacked from both sides," Adaric said with a serious face. "You mean Erigel's existence actually plays a role in balancing the situation? Currently, the Silver Pine Forest is controlled by Thurber, the Shadowfawn Castle, and Umbermill?" Zhang Cheng was not an idiot. On the contrary, he was quite smart, so he immediately understood what the Archmage was trying to say. If he were to attack the Shadowfawn Castle now, it would be equivalent to breaking the balance. The Forsaken would obviously not let go of such a rare opportunity, and then Umbermill would directly face the threat of the living dead. Chapter 297. There is no doubt that from a personal point of view, Zhang Cheng did not care about the lives of the townspeople at all. As long as he could obtain the Book of UR, it did not matter how many people died. But the problem was that Azeroth was different from most fantasy worlds. There was a group of people called the Bronze, who guarded the so-called correct history. Anyone who tried to cause damage to it would be mercilessly crushed by them, or even humanely destroyed. Therefore, he had to consider whether his every move would affect the so-called correct history. Otherwise, it would not be long before a dwarf girl called Chromie came to find him. Although this cute character in the game was very popular with players, Zhang Cheng did not want to see her at all. If possible, it would be best if they never met. Just as he was thinking about how to obtain the Book of UR without changing the correct history, Adaric, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly knocked on the table and said, "Young man, if you can't think of a good solution, why don't you listen to my suggestion?" "Oh, you have an idea." Zhang Cheng's face showed a surprised expression. "In fact, I have a plan. With the help of the energy nodes, we can build a superdimensional miniaturized space and then stuff the whole of Umbermill and the surrounding land into it. This way, no matter how many troops the Undercity sends, as long as they can't enter, they can't do anything to us. But it won't be easy to do this. I need to build a complicated magic barrier first. Maybe you can help me complete it." Adaric directly said what he had been hiding in his heart. In fact, when he discovered the magic nodes, he already had a similar idea. It was just that he did not have enough mages and apprentices, so he could not put it into action. But now, a senior member of the Kirin Tor with considerable magic knowledge had appeared in front of him. Naturally, he would seize the opportunity to complete the most difficult first step. Build a superdimensional miniaturized space. Zhang Cheng was obviously shocked by the Archmage's crazy plan. After all, this involved a lot of profound theoretical knowledge that he had not been able to access until now. The slightest carelessness could lead to a terrible disaster. But at the same time, if he could participate in such a large-scale magic project, both his experience and casting skills would be greatly improved. The only thing that troubled him now was, how long would it take to build such a complicated magic barrier? A few days? A few months? Or a few years? He could not be like the real wizard Dalaran, who could stay in one place for more than 10 years until he completely completed his research. Adaric sensed her worry and comforted her with a smile. "Relax. I won't take up too much of your time. Actually, I've already started a series of preparations half a year ago. If we work together, we should be able to complete the magic barrier in 2 weeks. How about it? Do you want to join? In return, I can teach you how to create and control arcane claws. It's my honor to work with you." After a simple weighing of the pros and cons, Zhang Cheng immediately bowed with one hand on his chest. In just 2 weeks, not only could he learn knowledge and skills, but he could also improve his experience in related areas. He really couldn't find any reason to refuse. "Awesome. Welcome to the team. Here, take a look. This is a barrier that I personally designed. If there are no problems, we will start work tomorrow morning. As for tonight, you should relax. A final word of warning. The girls of Umbermill are very passionate. If you're not strong enough, it's best not to date more than 2 at a time. Otherwise, I guarantee you won't be able to get out of bed tomorrow morning." Ha ha. At the end, Adaric couldn't help but laugh out loud. Perhaps it was because his long-planned plan could finally be put into practice, or perhaps it was because he recalled some interesting memories. In any case, he seemed to be so happy that he forgot about the little tricks that the Forsaken had been trying to pry into him. Zhang Cheng ignored the great wizard's playful teasing and left the meeting hall alone, walking towards the only inn in town that was still open. Along the way, he noticed that many young girls were teasing and seducing him with their naked eyes, but the men around him seemed to be used to it. Obviously, the long-term repression of life had caused people to have an extreme desire to vent. Sex happened to be the simplest and easiest way to vent. In addition, the war had caused a severe imbalance in the ratio of men to women. Therefore, any young and handsome man in town had become a hot commodity, not to mention that he was a wizard of high status. However, Zhang Cheng, whose mind was filled with the desire for power, did not respond to the temptations given by these girls. He went to the inn and had a simple dinner. Then, he returned to the room and took out the heavy notebook to read. Although Ansram Rinvawal had given him the notebook, claiming that it was his experience before he became a great wizard, there was a lot of content in it. On the contrary, there were more than 12 spells that were not provided in the wizard profession template. Pyroblast was only one of them. There were also many spells that could only be learned by level 70 players in the game, such as Ice Spear, Arcane Impact, Invisibility, Spell Steal, Dragon's Breath, Speed Reduction, Summon Water Elemental, and so on. It could be said that as long as he understood the contents of this notebook, he might not be able to reach the level of a great wizard, but it would be enough to become a powerful high-level spellcaster. As the cold moonlight once again shone on the silver pine forest, the dangerous night once again fell. Less than half an hour into the night, the loud howls of wolves reverberated around the town. In particular, the pairs of glowing green eyes made people's hair stand on end. However, under the watchful eyes of the night guards, these eyes disappeared after a while. No one knew where they went, and no one knew who the victim would be tonight. At the same time, behind the Amber Mill Inn, two sneaky shadows were quietly climbing up to the roof of the second floor with the help of a rope. They were not in a hurry to break in through the window. Instead, they carefully blew a small bottle of gray, gas-liquid mixture through the gap. After about 5 minutes, one of them gestured to the other. The latter did not say a word. He used an iron wire to hook open the latch. Like a dexterous monkey, he jumped into the room. His movements were so gentle that he didn't even make a sound when he landed. The former was not to be outdone and followed him into the room. Chapter 298. Asterisk bang. Bang. Asterisk, the gleaming sharp blade did not stab into the soft body as he had expected, nor did blood flow out. Instead, it stabbed into the hard bed. Before the two shadows could react to what had happened, a bone-piercing ice ring shot out from under the bed, directly freezing them in place. At the same time, the sleeping figure on the bed swayed twice in the air and then completely disappeared without a trace. "Who are you? Why do you want to assassinate me?" Zhang Cheng, who had crawled out from under the bed, narrowed his eyes and sized up the two assassins who were wrapped in black cloaks. Obviously, out of caution, he did not sleep on the soft bed. Instead, he chose to create a fake illusion while he slept under the bed. This way, even if something unexpected happened, he would still have a few crucial seconds to react. It had to be said that this little trick, which he learned from movies, really saved his life today. Looking at the two places on the bed that were pierced, one was the heart and the other was the spine. No matter which one it would be enough to make him lose his ability to move. The two shadows had no intention of answering the question. After looking at each other, they reached into their waists at the same time and took out a handful of silver-gray powder and sprinkled it in the air. After the silver-gray powder came into contact with the air, it immediately released a large amount of black smoke. In less than a second, it had enveloped the entire room. However, the smoke came and went quickly. In less than 3 seconds, it had disappeared without a trace. Damn it, it's vanished powder. Zhang Cheng did not have to spend much effort to identify the item used by the other party. Without any hesitation, he directly aimed at the window and cast an icicle. As someone who had rich PvP experience in games, he knew very well that after using Vanish, what rogues like to do the most was to open up a relatively safe distance and wait for an opportunity to attack or immediately retreat. Just as expected, accompanied by the ear-piercing sound of the ice shards spinning at high speed, the two were grabbed out of the shadows on the spot. Their cloaks and leather armor were quickly torn apart, revealing their hair-raising bodies underneath. The reason why it was creepy was because there was no flesh on the elbows, knees, and other joints. They were all white bones, and the skin had an unhealthy green color. The pungent antiseptic liquid was dripping down along the torn wounds. There was no doubt that these two assassins were not normal humans, but undead who claimed to have independent consciousness, the Forgotten One. There was no scream. There were no howls. There was no fear of death. They were as calm as Terminators who had walked out of a horror movie. After looking at each other, one of them stomped on the floor and rushed up at a speed that was hard to be seen by the naked eye, while the other jumped out of the window without hesitation and disappeared into the night. Zhang Cheng had no time to stop the guy who was running away, because he needed to deal with the dagger that was aimed at his left eye, especially when the surface of the dagger was glowing with an abnormal green color. Out of caution, he did not use Frost Shield or Mana Shield to block the attack. Instead, he used Blink to pass through the enemy, followed by a stream of dazzling arcane missiles shooting out from his fingers, going straight for the weak knees. In less than 4 or 5 seconds, the knee joint of the Forgotten One assassin's thigh and calf shattered into a pile of bones, and he slammed into the hard wall with a thud. Zhang Cheng did not give the other party any chance to fight back. Another flame impact broke the right hand that was holding the dagger. Only then did he stop casting and asked expressionlessly, "Speak. Who are you? Why do you want to assassinate me? What is the Undercity's plan for Umbermill? Living human, you want to get information from me? Ha ha. Sorry, you've got the wrong person. For the victory of Sylvanas." With a crazy roar, the Forgotten One assassin activated a pendant hanging around his neck. The next second, bright flames were released from the red gem below the pendant and directly engulfed the whole room. When the flames slowly subsided, except for Zhang Cheng, who was under the protection of the flame barrier, everything else was burned to ashes. His face was pale as he stared at the charred body of the Forgotten One assassin and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Should I say, as expected of the Forgotten One? Such madness, such disregard for the price." Even his own life was not in his heart. To be able to make such a group of lunatics so loyal, the Dark Queen Sylvanas is really a born leader. As soon as he finished speaking, the closed door was slammed open with a bang, and 7 or 8 guards with long swords and shields rushed in, constantly searching for traces of the enemy. Seeing this group of rookies panicking, Zhang Cheng could not help but shake his head and remind them, "Don't look. There are 2 Forgotten One assassins. One has already run away, and the other one is right under your feet." "Under my feet?" The leading female warrior subconsciously glanced down and immediately could not help but cover her mouth and vomit. She had no choice but to vomit. It should be noted that the Forsaken were corpses that had been resurrected by psychic magic. Therefore, after their bodies were burned, they were not charred corpses in the ordinary sense, but a mixture of embalming fluid, rotten flesh, and dense maggots. Among them, the maggots that were corroded by shadow energy were even more tenacious. Even after being burned, they were still wriggling. The scene was simply unimaginable. Fortunately, this group of young female warriors, who did not know if they had seen blood before, vomited for a while before Adaric rushed over. The Archmage inspected the miserable situation in the room and quickly realized what had happened. His eyes flashed with a frightening cold light, and finally, he lowered his voice and said in Zhang Cheng's ear, "Be prepared. These zombies will not just stand by and watch as our plan succeeds. In the next 2 weeks, it is likely that there will be more and more similar assassinations." "Don't worry, Master. Perhaps it is difficult for me to construct a large and complex magical barrier, but fighting and killing is as easy as eating and drinking to me. I promise, as long as they do not care about losses, I will kill 1, 2, and 2 until they have no one to send." Zhang Cheng pursed his lips and revealed a cruel smile. Chapter 299. The assassination that happened in the hotel did not cause much panic in Umbermill. To be exact, compared to the werewolves that lurked in the woods every night, the 2 assassins of the Forgotten Ones were nothing. Moreover, not only did they not kill anyone, but the damage they caused was limited to destroying a guest room. One of the unlucky ones was even burned to death. No one realized how different the Forgotten Ones were from the other races that had appeared in Azeroth before. Their madness, their darkness, and their cruelty were no different from the scourge that had swept across half of the continent. Of course, Zhang Cheng did not remind the townspeople of the horror of the Forgotten Ones. Instead, he devoted himself to the construction of the magic barrier. In particular, the Archmage Adaric's unique interpretation of space and arcane magic gave him a refreshing feeling. In less than a week, he stumbled and mastered a lot of the corresponding skills. He even used the convenience of the energy nodes to successfully create an arcane minion that was half a meter tall. This special life form made purely of arcane energy did not have any ability to think. It completely obeyed the orders of its creator and could use spells like Arcane Missile, Arcane Explosion, Flash, and so on. When it was destroyed by the enemy, it would release all the energy stored in its body, creating a terrifying energy turbulence. If enough arcane energy was used at one time, even the Archmage would not be able to cast spells smoothly in the turbulence created by the explosion of the arcane minion. It was no wonder that neither Erigel of the Shadowfang Castle nor the Forgotten Ones in Seberchel dared to attack. This alone was quite terrifying. In addition, when assisting the Archmage in arranging the arcane runes, Zhangqing also learned a lot of new arrangements. After 2 weeks of cooperation, he had gained far more than what he had sacrificed. Looking at the faintly discernible purple light surrounding the wall, Adarek finally heaved a sigh of relief. He teased with a smile. Although those annoying zombies haven't stopped harassing and destroying these days, we still made it through, didn't we? Yes, I hope the commander of the Forsaken doesn't feel too bad about losing his men, Zhang Cheng said sarcastically in a half-joking tone. Ever since the assassin escaped, the Forsaken had apparently received news that Umbermill was preparing to build a magic barrier. They had sent out more than 40 elite bandits in an attempt to delay the process by assassinating the participating mages and apprentices. Unfortunately, the furious Zhang Cheng had already set up a series of defensive measures against stealth units. In the end, they lost more than half of their men in the first surprise attack. The rest of them were caught and cleaned up one by one under the pursuit of the hounds with a keen sense of smell. Zhang Qing knew that the Forsaken were not afraid of pain or death and would not reveal any confidential information. Therefore, he did not intend to capture any captives. Instead, he attacked immediately, not giving the other party the slightest chance to perish together with him. He believed that after some time, the enemy commander would be furious when he heard that his men had been wiped out. After all, the number of the Forsaken was not large to begin with. The 40 elite bandits were almost 1/10 of the total number of troops stationed in Silverpine Forest. Moreover, they were all bandits who were good at spying and assassination. For a long time to come, Hadrick would become deaf and blind due to the lack of intelligence gathering personnel. Ha! I also want to see the wonderful expressions on the faces of those living dead. By the way, now that the barrier is completed, are you going to Shadowfang Castle to retrieve the Book of UR? Adaric asked as he stroked the beard on his chin. That's right. If you don't have any other orders, I would like to borrow a horse and set off immediately. Before the Forsaken know what happened, we'll settle everything. Zhang Cheng nodded without hesitation. All right, I'll have the stable prepare a fast horse and 5 days' worth of food for you. Remember, do not go near the burning village after nightfall. The villagers there have all been turned into terrifying monsters by Erigel. When he said the last few words, Adaric's smile quickly disappeared and was replaced by a solemn and serious expression. Don't worry, Master. You should know how weak Erigel's spellcasting ability is and how weak his so-called power is. He's not a threat to me at all, Zhang Cheng assured confidently. Perhaps others did not know the level of Erigel's sorcerer, but as someone who was familiar with the story of the game, he knew very well that this fellow who hid in the Shadowfang Castle all day to study the werewolves was actually just a lucky idiot. In essence, he was no different from the sorcerer apprentice Akar Kaiser, who had coincidentally obtained the divine crystal shard in the story of Icewind Dale. Without the Book of UR, Erigel's level would at most be slightly higher than the average sorcerer in Dalaran. With Zhang Cheng's current power, he could easily crush him in a matter of minutes. Seeing that the young man standing in front of him did not realize the danger of the Shadowfang Castle, Adaric had to patiently explain, I'm not worried about who's stronger between you and Erigel. I'm worried about the werewolves. Their blood contains the curse of corruption and corruption. If you're accidentally infected, you'll quickly become one of them. I don't want to see you leading an army of werewolves to attack Umbermere one day. You mean, I have to be careful of infection? Zhang Cheng sharply grasped the key words. Yes. As far as I know, the blood of werewolves, especially those named the son of Erigel, has a curse that can even infect the undead. Even a great sorcerer like me can't remove it. You have to be extra careful in battle. Don't get scratched or bitten or else I'll be infected. Zhang Cheng finished the second half of the sentence for the great sorcerer expressionlessly. He finally understood what the real danger of the Shadowfawn Castle was. It was not the ghost that wandered inside and outside the castle, nor was it Erigil's shadow magic. It was the werewolves that seemed to have nothing but tenacious vitality. These wild beasts that had lost their minds were not much different from rabies. They were the type that would kill whoever they bit. There was no way to save them so far. Perhaps in the eyes of some, becoming a werewolf was not a bad thing. At least they could obtain superhuman strength, speed, and agility. However, he did not like this kind of uncontrollable power at all. It's good that you know. Go, complete your mission. I look forward to hearing news of your triumphant return. With that, the great sorcerer patted Zhongcheng's shoulder lightly and returned to the barrier alone. Chapter 300. After running for about 4 to 5 hours along the path full of weeds, Zhongcheng finally saw the tall stone fortress at the top of the cliff in the southern part of the Silver Pine Forest. At the same time, he also understood why the Forsaken viewed it as a thorn in their side. Just as the Archmage Adaric had described, the Shadowfawn Keep was the only way for Thurber to go south. Perhaps the living dead did not need food or water, but they needed to transport weapons, armor, potions, and even magical plagues. Not to mention, the werewolves under Arugo's command carried a strong curse that would infect anyone who was bitten by them. With such a group of madmen causing trouble behind their backs, as long as they were not idiots, they would first deal with them before thinking about expanding. We're finally here. Dear Arugo, I hope you know what's good for you. Don't force me to kill you. Zhongcheng muttered to himself as he let go of the horse, which was so tired that it kept breathing out white steam and let it run to the side to drink water and eat grass. Although the warhorses of Azeroth were affected by the magic energy everywhere, they were far stronger and more durable than normal horses. However, running for a few hours in a row still tired them out. If they continued to run, they would fall to the ground and foam at the mouth or die of cardiac arrest. After doing some simple exercises to relieve the soreness in his waist and legs, Zhongcheng did not rush to summon Kolokelba. Instead, he walked to the entrance with a relaxed expression and bowed slightly to the dark and damp passage inside. Respected Archmage Arugo, I represent the Kirin Tor Council of Dalaran to have a talk with you. Silence. Abnormal silence. Suddenly, a silver wolf rushed out from the darkness, opening its bloody mouth full of sharp teeth and fiercely pouncing on him. But unfortunately, due to the iron gate, it couldn't bite anything. With a bang, it crashed into a thick iron pillar and let out a crazy roar. If it was a normal person, they would have been scared away by this giant wolf. However, Zhongcheng looked at the beast with murky eyes with great interest. After a full minute, he commented, using werewolf blood to inject into the wolf's body so that they can obey the werewolf's orders and fight together. I have to say, you're a typical example of losing big for small gains. You've completely wasted the precious knowledge recorded in the Book of UR. Oh, are you mocking my research? A dark and low voice came through the iron gate. Mocking? No. I'm just stating a fact. Indeed, the curse in the werewolf blood can provide a powerful army in a short period of time. But don't forget, for a mage, what is true power? Is it an invincible army? No, that was never the case. True power comes from profound magical knowledge, superb spell-casting techniques, and destructive spells. Simply put, it's our own bodies, Zhongcheng replied meaningfully. Those old fogies of the council sent you to pass on this nonsense? The deep voice sneered. Zhongcheng shook his head. You got it wrong. I never pass on anyone's words. What I said just now was my true thoughts. Finally, please hand over the Book of UR. I don't want to make things too ugly, and I don't want this castle to suffer too much destruction. Arrogant. Accompanied by an angry roar, a man in a long black robe walked out from the darkness. He held a strangely shaped staff in his hand, and his whole body was filled with dense shadow energy, as if he wanted to become one with the darkness around him. Obviously, he was none other than the famous Great Mage Erigil. Of course, the title of Great Mage was not recognized by the Kirin Tor Council. It was a title he had given himself without permission. Feeling that the man's body had been seriously corroded by the shadow energy, Zhang Cheng could not help but sigh. He raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Instantly, boom, a powerful arcane energy spread out in all directions with him as the center, causing a series of chain reactions. The silver wolf on the other side of the iron gate did not even have a chance to react. He was sent flying and crashed into the wall, spitting out bright red blood. As for Aragorn, he cast an unknown spell and wrapped himself in a layer of shadow. Then he took 2 steps back and stabilized himself. With a look of vigilance, he asked, "What are you trying to do?" "Nothing. In order to let you sit down and talk peacefully, I think it's a good choice to show off my power. At least it will let you know who's the arrogant one here. By the way, those furry little pets behind you don't work on me." Zhang Cheng unceremoniously exposed the other party's sinister intentions. Aragorn narrowed his eyes and stared at the young man standing in front of the iron gate. He seemed to be thinking about something. After a full minute, a strange smile appeared on his face. Then he raised his hand and waved it forward. "Let's go. Children, kill him." Awoo! Accompanied by ear-piercing howls, countless glowing green eyes appeared in the darkness. In the blink of an eye, the owners of these eyes rushed out of the darkness and pounced towards Zhang Cheng. At the same time, the iron gate that was originally tightly shut began to creak and slowly opened. Sigh. I knew the negotiation wouldn't go smoothly. Zhang Cheng calmly took a few steps back and opened up a distance of about 10 meters. He did not hesitate to activate the spell rewarded by the parchment, Dragon's Pledge. Whoa! After a strange tremor, a huge, complex magic array suddenly appeared on the ground. Then, a tear quickly appeared in the tightly sealed space. Before the swarming wolves could react to what was happening, a bright and scorching flame spewed out from the crack. The intense heat not only melted the iron gate into molten iron, but even the rocks that were used to build the fortress were melted. Fortunately, Aragorn reacted quickly and disappeared from the spot with a flash. Otherwise, he would have died from the deadly spit. When the flames dissipated, a giant dragon covered in beautiful violet scales stood at the entrance of the Shadow Fawn Castle. Compared to the last time they parted, Kulo Kelba's body had grown by almost 4 meters. Whether it was its sharp claws or its muscular body, they all proved that this dragon possessed destructive power. Just as Zhang Cheng was about to mount the dragon and sweep through the castle, the scales on Kulo Kelba's body suddenly began to glow. The arcane energy in the air seemed to go berserk as it surged into the dragon's body. The speed was so fast that it even formed a beautiful magical vortex. Chapter 301. Damn it, why is there such a huge commotion? Zhang Cheng's expression darkened as he watched the dragon frantically absorbing the arcane energy. He had expected that Kulo Kelba would absorb a portion of the magic energy in the world of Azeroth to satisfy its innate deficiencies. But he never expected that it would absorb so much energy that there would be a temporary vacuum of arcane energy within a few kilometers of the dragon. It would be difficult to even prevent the loss of mana in the dragon's body, let alone cast spells. As for Aragorn, he had long been frightened by this shocking scene and hid in the deepest part of the castle. He could not believe that a dragon had appeared in front of his door and caused such an intense energy absorption phenomenon. He did not know how much time had passed. Perhaps it was a few minutes, perhaps it was a few hours when the 20 or so magic vortexes in the air gradually calmed down. Kulo Kelba finally opened its frightening eyes. This time, there was no longer a trace of bestiality in its eyes. Instead, they were filled with the light of wisdom. Kulo Kelba. Zhang Cheng called out the dragon's name in a low voice, trying to understand the situation at hand. But he never expected that the dragon would actually bend down and reply in standard Westerosi. "It's me, father. May I know where this is?" You can speak." Zhang Cheng's eyes widened, an expression of disbelief on his face. "Yes, I feel like I've suddenly become much stronger and smarter. There's a smell in the air here that I like. Is this your new castle?" Kulo Kelba was like a curious child, constantly looking around at its surroundings. It was completely unaware that it had left the continent of Westeros and arrived in a completely foreign and more dangerous world. Although Zhang Cheng was a little embarrassed to be called father by such a large creature, he quickly adjusted his state of mind. He climbed on a dragon's back and gently patted the dragon's neck. "No, this is not my castle. On the contrary, it belongs to the enemy. Now, burn it for me. Remember, don't touch the tallest tower. There's a very important book inside that I desire." Slaughter and destruction. Huh? That's what I'm best at. Kulo Kelba flapped his wings and soared into the sky, beginning a merciless slaughter of the entire Shadow Fawn Castle. Whether it was the wandering spirits or the various giant wolves and werewolves, they were all burned to ashes by the deadly flames. They were unable to make any effective counterattacks. The flames that the adult WYRM of the Song of Ice and Fire spewed out could even melt the granite used to build castles. Not to mention, the flames that Ku Luo Koalba spewed out were not as simple as high-temperature flames. They were also mixed with terrifying arcane energy, and anything that came into contact with them would explode in an incredible manner. Under such intense destruction, the walls of the Shadow Fawn Castle, which had a long history, began to crumble. In the blink of an eye, it was reduced to ruins. Only the tower remained intact. Through the window, Aragorn could clearly see the terrifying beasts circling in the sky. His eyes were filled with fear and despair. Perhaps he had once been full of confidence in the werewolf army that he had created, thinking that he could use their strength to destroy the Alliance and the Horde and achieve great things. But at this moment, the cruel reality told him that not to mention any great achievements, a dragon could send his dreams to hell. At the same time, Aragorn also understood that the dragon did not attack the tower, not because it was afraid of his power, but because it wanted to ensure that the precious Book of UR would not be accidentally damaged. It was common knowledge that mages were a bunch of realists who valued their lives more than anything else. When they were in danger, they did not mind throwing themselves to the enemy, as long as the enemy could guarantee their own safety. After recognizing the huge gap between their power, Aragorn did not hesitate to take out the Book of UR from the bookshelf. He shouted at the top of his lungs, "You win. Here, this book is yours." "Haha, thank you." Zhang Cheng gestured for Kulo Kelba to lower his height. He snatched the book with a blue cover from him and quickly flipped through it. After confirming that the contents were not fake, he nodded in satisfaction. "Not bad. If only you had taken it out earlier, we could have avoided conflict. But now, just this book alone is far from enough. You have to pay a price to make up for my loss." "Your loss?" Aragorn glanced to the almost destroyed castle, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Yes, I also want your research notes on the werewolves, and 10 bottles of Virgin's blood." Zhang Cheng straightforwardly laid out his harsh conditions. According to his memories, the werewolves were a species that was first born a long, long time ago. They seemed to be inextricably linked to the Druid sect. But in the end, these guys could not control themselves. They all went crazy and became the first werewolves in the world of Azeroth. In order to prevent them from hurting people, the famous hero Malfurion banished them all to another dimension. In the end, they were inadvertently discovered by UR and recorded in the Book of UR. Coincidentally, Aragorn, who had just been attacked by Arthas and Dalaran, desperately desired a power that could protect him. The Gilnea's kingdom also happened to be invaded by the Scourge, so the two sides hit it off. They summoned the first generation of werewolves from another dimension and defeated the invading Scourge army. At the same time, they also planted the roots of the curse. And the strongest of these first-generation werewolves was called Wogan. It was because of his blood that Aragorn created the Wolf King Nandus, the sons of Aragorn, and a series of other second-generation werewolves. There was no doubt that Wogan's blood had a considerable amount of power. It could also be called a curse and had a lot of research value. Zhang Cheng had never been a moralist, nor was he obsessed with morality. As long as he could increase his own strength, he did not care what methods he used. Just you wait. Although Aragorn wanted to curse, he held back. He turned back to the room and handed over a notebook and 10 bottles of blood that emitted an abnormal gray color. "Very good. Now we are even. One last reminder, the Forgotten Ones will not notice what happened in the Shadowfawn Castle. So you have about half a month to restore this place to its original state. Otherwise, you should know better than me what the living dead will do, right? After saying this sentence full of hints, Zhang Cheng patted the dragon's neck again. Chapter 302. After crossing the border between Silverpine Forest and Hillsbrad Hills, Zhang Cheng quickly chose an inconspicuous valley as his temporary resting place. The moment Kulo Kelba's loud warning landed, the frightened warhorse immediately fled into the forest, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. However, Zhang Cheng had no time to chase after the horse. He quickly jumped down from the dragon's back, and with the help of the few tools he had in his pouch, he began to examine the dragon's body, especially the changes in its blood. For magical creatures, blood was not only for transportation, metabolism, immune system, and other normal functions, but also for the operation of energy. In order to figure out their strength, all one had to do was to draw a little blood and analyze the amount of energy contained in each milligram of blood. Of course, this calculation method, which obviously had modern scientific tendencies, was his own invention. Most mages only drew blood from a standard potion bottle, and then used their own estimation to determine the strength of the blood. "Father, are you worried about my changes?" Kulo Kelba seemed to be used to having its blood drawn. Not only did it not resist, it even opened its mouth cooperatively, allowing the sharp needle to pierce into the soft inner walls of its mouth. Should I not be worried? You have to understand that all forms of power and evolution do not happen for no reason, and that there is a price to pay. As Zhang Cheng explained, he squeezed the blood from the needle into a few test tubes and then injected a small amount of energy of different attributes into them for observation. In just a few seconds, the test tube injected with arcane energy was the first to emit a bright light, as if even the sun in the sky had lost its color. Without a doubt, Kulo Kelba's blood contained the highest amount of arcane energy. In terms of volume, it far exceeded the limits of most experienced mages, and even archmages. If it could learn magic, its power would surpass most spellcasters. It would be easier than eating or drinking. But unfortunately, even though the dragon had a clear mind and the ability to speak, its intelligence level was the same as that of a 7- or 8-year-old child. It was full of curiosity about everything around it, and it kept asking questions as if it was asking 100,000 questions. With this level of intelligence, it would be difficult for him to even solve difficult math problems, let alone learn difficult magical theories. However, Zhang Cheng felt that it would be too wasteful to let this amazing magical talent go to waste. At the very least, he would never allow such a situation to happen. Just as he was feeling a little conflicted and had a headache, the other test tubes that were originally calm suddenly erupted with violent reactions. The red blood that flashed with a violet luster from time to time suddenly began to glow. Some showed a warm golden glow, some began to burn fiercely, some condensed into bone-chilling ice, some constantly released white electric light, and the last bottle even emitted an ominous black fog. What was even more shocking was that after the brief energy resonance, all the test tubes turned back to the violet glow that only arcane energy could have. Let alone Zhang Cheng, who had no idea what was going on. Even a great wizard like Dalaran would be dumbfounded by such a violent and rapid transformation of energy. Unbelievable. It was too unbelievable. Holy light, shadow, elemental life. All forms of energy were transformed into arcane energy in the end and merged into the blood without much loss. This doesn't conform to the theories recorded in books. Is it because of the dragon species of the Song of Ice and Fire? Or did something happen during the incubation? Energy, arcane, devour, transform. He was like a madman who had discovered a new continent. His eyes were filled with fanaticism, and his mouth kept muttering to himself. In contrast, Kulo Kelba was much calmer. It slowly lay down, opened its mouth full of sharp teeth, and yawned. As an experimental subject that was often drawn blood and tested since it was born, it had seen too many unreasonable and crazy behaviors of its father It did not feel that there was anything to be surprised about at all. It fell into a semi-comatose state on its own. In short, the man and the dragon settled down in the valley. At least, Kulo Kelba knew that before its father got the answer he wanted, they would not move easily. Time flew, and in the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed. With the power of a mage, Zhang Cheng built a temporary laboratory out of clay, wood, and stone. He hid in it all day, constantly exploring the mysteries of the dragon's blood. Other than coming out to draw blood when he ran out of research materials, he spent the rest of his time in the simple house. As for Kulo Kelba, it would occasionally hunt some animals to fill its stomach. The rest of the time, it would absorb the rich magical energy in the air and then sleep. It had only been a few days since it came to Azeroth, but its body had already grown to an astonishing 40 meters. It was almost no different from a guardian dragon that had lived for hundreds or thousands of years. No one would believe that this little guy was only about 1 year old since it hatched, and it was still growing at an unbelievable speed. In a few years' time, it would become a true prehistoric behemoth, a terrifying monster that could destroy a city or even a country by itself. Of course, if it was just the change in size, it would not be enough to attract Zhang Cheng's research interest. What really interested him was Kulo Kelba's extremely malleable magical talent. Most of the spells and different types of energy would be converted into arcane spells in front of this dragon and be absorbed and stored. It was as if its huge body was nurturing something. This also meant that all spellcasters in front of Kulo Kelba could only use summoning or shape-shifting spells to defeat it. Otherwise, if they used spells like Fireball, Frost Arrow, or Arcane Missile, they would turn into energy and be absorbed before they could even get close. Although there was a ceiling for this absorption, it was impossible for most mages to achieve. Furthermore, as long as they were not crazy, no mage would try to fight a dragon in close combat. To put it simply, it's magic absorption and immunity. One incredible ability. Zhang Cheng stared with bloodshot eyes and concluded with a bitter smile. As a mage, he knew all too well how amazing Kulo Kelba's abilities were. Coupled with its deadly spit of arcane energy, it was the natural nemesis of all mages. Chapter 303. Father, are you afraid of me? Kulo Kelba seemed to have sensed something. It opened its eyes and asked in an uncertain tone. It was obvious that its intelligence was not enough to understand complex emotions, especially when it came to the human heart, which was known for its sinister nature. Shouldn't I be afraid? You should know that your current strength perfectly counters mine. Zhang Cheng chuckled as he patted the dragon's large head. Just as the dragon had mentioned, after he confirmed the dragon's abilities, he felt an indescribable fear. However, this fear was not because he was afraid that Kulo Kelba would betray him one day. It was simply a respect for power itself. After all, he had given up so many things in order to obtain knowledge and power, including kindness and humanity. He also had to endure boredom, loneliness to achieve what he had today. But this dragon in front of him, all it did was eat, drink, sleep, and occasionally come out to spit out a few mouthfuls of dragon flames. It had obtained the magical talent that others dreamed of. Even a most open-minded person would feel jealous. Fortunately, this negative feeling did not bother Zhang Cheng for too long. After a short moment, he regained his clarity and rationality. No matter what, Kulo Kelba was personally created by him. It was like his own child. Furthermore, it had played a crucial role in many battles. There was no reason for him to be too conflicted. I don't understand. The dragon's ferocious face revealed a puzzled expression. Hee. You will understand when you grow up and mature. Remember, do not use your ability easily. Once you use it, use all your strength to kill everyone here. Make sure that no one else knows about it. Do you understand? Zhang Cheng instructed sternly. Understood. Kulo Kelba nodded thoughtfully. Although it did not understand the reason for doing so, it was used to killing and destruction. It did not mind killing a few more insignificant ants. To be precise, this dragon was still in its infancy. It had yet to develop the corresponding morals and values. It was like a clean piece of white paper that had unknowingly been dyed gray. Seeing Kulo Kelba so obedient, Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with gratification. Very good. This world is still too dangerous for you. It's best if you go back and properly digest the energy stored in your body. Also, don't forget to keep it a secret. Don't let anyone know that you can speak, especially Daenerys. If there was any worry about the Dragon's Vow, the powerful summoning spell, it would undoubtedly be accidentally revealing the secret of being able to travel between different worlds. Perhaps in the past, when Kulo Kelba was unable to speak, he could console himself with groundless worries. But now, he had to take it seriously. Keep it a secret and don't say anything. Got it. The giant dragon agreed without hesitation. In fact, ever since Zhang Cheng left the Song of Ice and Fire world, he spent most of his time in the dragon nest of Monarch's Descent Red Castle. Except for Daenerys, who occasionally came back to visit, no one dared to approach him. What a good child. Zhang Cheng stroked the scales that were becoming harder and thicker as he activated the spell, Dragon's Pledge. In an instant, a gigantic magic array emerged from the ground once more. Immediately afterward, a powerful force tore through space and sucked Kulo Kelba into the magic array. In less than 10 seconds, everything returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. Interesting. Does this count as interplanar teleportation? I wonder what will happen if I go in. Forget it. It's too dangerous. It's better not to joke around with my life for now. Maybe next time, I can try experimenting on a small animal. With that, Zhang Cheng raised his hand and snapped his fingers. He then walked toward the only exit of the valley without looking back. Less than 10 meters away, the temporary residence made of wood, clay, and stone suddenly burst into red flames. The next second, boom, the entire house was engulfed in scorching flames. All traces of the experiments in the past few days were cleared away by the raging fire. After walking along the rugged mountain road for about 3 hours, he finally found the escaping horse and then galloped in the direction of Dalaran. It didn't take long for him to pass through the magic enchantment again and return to the relaxing magic kingdom. After asking the mage on duty briefly, Zhang Cheng learned that Grand Mage Anselm Rinvawal had not returned yet. Instead, he gave up his plan to go to the central tower and chose to return to his house in Dalaran. But he obviously forgot one thing. That was, there was still a 13 or 14-year-old lowly living in the house. When he pushed open the bathroom door and was about to take off his clothes to take a bath and rest for 2 days, he suddenly found a naked girl lying in the bathtub with her eyes wide open, looking at him with a gaze full of nervousness and fear. Oh, damn it. He couldn't help but curse in a low voice. He quickly closed the door and explained, "Sorry, Jenny. I didn't know you were taking a bath." "No, it's nothing, sir. I'll come out right away. Please wait a moment." The little girl was obviously frightened. She quickly put on a light nightgown, ran out, bowed, and hurriedly went into her room. She didn't even notice that because she didn't have time to wear underwear, her body that had just begun to develop was completely exposed to the other party's sight. The green little apple is starting to mature a little. Zhang Cheng smiled and teased while taking off his clothes and jumping into the slightly hot bathtub to relax. Due to magic, all the daily water for Dalaran's residences came from a pipeline directly connected to the water element plane, so whether it was the bathtub or the fountain, the water was constantly changing. There was no need to worry about whether the water quality was clean or not. Just as he was enjoying the comfortable feeling brought by the expansion of his pores, Jenny, who had left and returned, walked in with a plate of steaming hot food. She stuttered, Sir, you must be hungry. This is the dinner I made for you." "Thank you, put it here." Zhang Cheng pointed to the table next to the bathtub. The mage of Dalaran, who was known for being extravagant and wasteful, had always had the habit of eating while taking a bath. Therefore, there was often a place for food and drinks during the construction process. "Please enjoy. I still have an alchemy class in the evening, so I won't bother you." With that, the girl quickly turned and left the place that made her blush. Chapter 304. At night, in an alchemy workshop located 20 meters underground in the East District of Dalaran, hundreds of apprentices between the ages of 10 and 15 were trying to make a variety of low-level potions and magic tools under the guidance of their respective mentors. Some of the senior apprentices already had quite skilled craftsmanship and began to use these skills to earn a lot of gold coins for themselves to make up for the huge consumption in the process of learning magic. It should be known that apart from a few wealthy merchants and princes and princesses, even the nobles could not afford the astronomical increase in tuition fees. So most of the apprentices completed their studies by working part-time to finally become a qualified mage. To some extent, the apprentices accumulated valuable experience in this process, and the Kirin Tor Council could also make a profit by selling the low-level potions and magic tools made by these apprentices to cover their daily expenses. It could be said to be a win-win situation. Of course, the income of the apprentices naturally could not be compared to that of the mages. On one hand, they could not buy raw materials at a low price, and, on the other hand, a part of every gold coin they earned would go into the pockets of their mentors. As for how much this part was, it depended on how black-hearted the mentors were. It could be as little as a third, or as much as half. In any case, before becoming a recognized mage, they were just small fries that were oppressed. However, all of this was not a problem for the quiet and introverted Jenny, because for the rise of the family, old George almost gave his all to support his little daughter, and her monthly living expenses were almost 6 times that of the apprentices of the same age. In addition, because she lived with Zhang Cheng, many people mistakenly thought that the girl was the former's lover, so the old mage Jabez, who was in his early 60s, never made things difficult for her. Although there were times when she really wanted to clear up the misunderstanding. When she recalled her father's instructions before he left, she forced herself to endure it and allowed the rumors to spread. There were even many female apprentices who boasted of their beauty, asking her for advice on how to seduce a powerful and experienced mage. After all, the age limit had never been a stumbling block for love and desire in Azeroth. In the past, when Jaina was still a young lowly, the 1,000-year-old Kale that still resolutely joined the ranks of her pursuers. According to the laws and moral standards of Earth, a nerd like him who was a Lullicon would definitely be sentenced to at least 3 years in prison, and the maximum penalty would be death. But in reality, ordinary people did not show any rejection or disgust towards this. Instead, they felt that it was very romantic. It was simply the most classic love story of a prince and a princess in fairy tales. Unfortunately, the beautiful princess did not choose the handsome and elegant elven prince. Instead, she chose the arrogant human prince, Arthas Menethil. In fact, in the human kingdoms, it was very common for young girls to be paired with middle-aged men, or even white-haired old men. This was especially true for nobles who valued bloodlines. As for the love affairs between Dalaran and his apprentices, more than half of the beautiful male and female apprentices wished they could climb into their mentor's bed and use their youth to exchange for endless knowledge and power. Just as Jenny kept replaying the awkward scene from not too long ago in her mind, the grizzled old mage Jabez suddenly reminded her, "You put in too much silver-leaf grass." The girl was like a frightened bunny. She immediately threw the silver-leaf powder in her hand into the beaker. In an instant, the medicinal liquid that was still emitting green smoke suddenly became turbid, and it even emitted a choking and pungent smell. There was no need to ask to know that this bottle of magical potion was completely wasted. Extremely depressed, she quickly lowered her head and explained with a stuttering voice, I'm sorry, Mentor. I was distracted. Remember, you're now an apprentice. You have to do your duty as an apprentice. Don't think about other things when you are studying alchemy." Jabez scolded loudly, blowing his beard and glaring eyes. "I'm sorry." The girl, who was never good with words, only lowered her head and kept apologizing. Forget it. Go get another set of materials and start again." The old mage waved his hand and cleaned up the turbid liquid in the beaker. He shook his head helplessly. He completely did not understand. What was so good about this clumsy little girl in front of him that she could actually gain the favor of a senior member of the Kirin Tor Parliament? Watching her mentor's back gradually disappear into the distance, Jenny breathed a sigh of relief. She planned to turn around and go to the material warehouse to get another set of silverleaf grass powder. But before she could take a step, a 17 or 18-year-old girl with black hair and black eyes suddenly hugged her from behind. She pinched the part of her chest that had just started to protrude and teased in a low voice, "Wow, our cute little Jenny is getting more and more alluring. I heard that the one in your family is back. How was it? Did he love you well? Damn it, Zenobia, how many times have I told you? Mr. Mage is only protecting me according to my father's request. Nothing happened between us." Jenny forcefully pried away the two mischievous hands and rolled her eyes in annoyance. It was obvious that the two of them had known each other for a long time, and they were quite close friends. Hee hee, I'm just kidding. I know you're still a pure girl who blushes when you see other people kissing. But to be honest, did you mention the thing I asked you to do last time? The girl called Zenobia winked playfully. Sorry, something happened at home just now. I didn't have time to mention it. Jenny's white face once again blushed. Oh, what happened? Zenobia's expression showed that she was interested in gossip. But before Jenny could answer, an unfamiliar figure suddenly appeared at the bottom of the stairs at the entrance. Sir, why are you here? Jenny abandoned her only friend in Dalaran and quickly walked forward to bow to him. The person who came was none other than Zhang Cheng, who had just finished bathing and changed into a new set of clothes. He first glanced at the slightly flustered Zenobia before asking with a smile, "Who is that?" "Zenobia. She is my friend and helped me a lot when I first became an apprentice." Jenny carefully replied, "Greetings, Sir Mage. My full name is Zenobia Eberlock. It is an honor to meet you." The girl bowed in a standard noble salute. "Eberlock, how is Duke Eberlock related to you?" Zhang Cheng asked with interest as he stroked his chin. "He's my uncle, and Althea is my cousin," Zenobia answered without hesitation. Chapter 305. Sir, Zenobia Jenny seemed to have noticed that something was wrong with the atmosphere and wanted to explain on behalf of her friend. However, before she could finish, she was rudely interrupted by Zhang Cheng. "Quiet. She has her own mouth. You don't have to tell her." The girl was startled by the stern tone and hurriedly bit her lower lip, standing there without saying a word. Zenobia only now realized how wrong she was. The young mage standing in front of her was not like the rumors outside, who only became a senior member of the Kirin Tor Council because of the favor of a great mage. Instead, he had extremely sharp insight and saw through her little trick at their first meeting. However, she had no room to retreat. To be precise, as the ruler of Night Town, the Ablocks had no room to retreat. Be it the land and sky tainted by evil magic, the undead creatures that kept popping out of Raven Ridge, the ogres in Vogel Ogre Mountain, or the werewolves that came out of nowhere, all of them threatened the rule of the house's current leader, Duke Elro Eberlock. Due to the lack of support from Stormwind City for a long time, the formerly peaceful town was now completely isolated. Most of the refugees could only hide in houses or hotels under the protection of the Night Watchers and barely survive by relying on their savings. As a member of the Ablocks, Zenobia had not received tuition and living expenses from her father for almost 3 to 4 months, so she was very clear about how bad the situation was. She had no choice but to borrow the power of Mage Dalaran to solve the trouble plaguing Night Town. Thinking of this, the girl stroked her long black hair and said in an incomparably sincere tone, "Sir, I hope to speak with you alone, just the two of us." Zhang Cheng stared into the other party's eyes for a full minute before nodding with a faint smile on his face. "Sure, but remember, you only have one chance. Please show me your utmost sincerity. I'm not someone who is easily deceived." "Understood. Rest assured, I won't let you down," Zenobia promised solemnly. "Then what are you waiting for? Lead the way. I believe you must have prepared a quiet room, right? Please follow me." After a short conversation, Zenobia gave Jenny an apologetic smile and turned to walk upstairs to the apprentice lounge. About 3 to 5 minutes later, the two came to a rather narrow room. The bed and desk took up more than 30% of the space, and the rest were some boxes, clothes, and other daily necessities. Glancing at the furnishings around him, Zhang Cheng sat down without hesitation and asked directly, "Tell me, what is your purpose in getting close to Jenny?" "Your Excellency, my hometown, Night Town, is suffering an unprecedented calamity. Zenobia tried to arouse the other party's sympathy with a sorrowful tone. Unfortunately, the stone-hearted Zhang Cheng wasn't moved at all. He interrupted him expressionlessly. "Get to the point." Seeing that her little trick did not work, Zenobia quickly put away the sorrowful expression on her face and said quickly, "I heard that you participated in a secret operation related to the magic plague. You must know how to deal with a large number of undead and monsters, right?" "So?" Zhang Cheng seemed to have noticed something, and there was a hint of playfulness in his eyes. "So I want to ask you to help me deal with the endless stream of undead crawling out of Raven Ridge." Not knowing if it was because of nervousness or some other reason, Zenobia subconsciously clenched her fists when she said this, and her whole body trembled slightly. "Oh, what can I get in return? Or what are you going to use to pay for hiring me?" Zhang Cheng stroked his chin with interest. He had a rough idea of what had happened in Darkshire, especially since Raven Ridge was originally a rather famous cemetery. Before the accident, it had the best embalming technology in the entire Azeroth. Many famous nobles had their corpses taken care of here after their deaths, and then transported back to their hometown for burial. Of course, most of them were directly buried in huge underground tombs. This was also why, when the undead appeared, Nighttown did not dare to send out night watchers to clear them out. No one knew how many corpses had turned into skeletons and ghouls in the tombs. Perhaps the number of undead was 10 or 20 times more than the entire population of Nighttown combined. Although the werewolves and ogres also posed a considerable threat to Nighttown, the real threat was the undead entrenched near the tomb at Crow Ridge. Once these undead began to move east along the main road, the entire town would be in danger of being razed. Zenobia turned around and carefully took out an emerald green crystal from an exquisite wooden box and gently placed it on the table. Zhang Cheng's pupils suddenly shrank, and he asked in an uncertain tone, "A piece of life essence. Where did you get it?" "A hunter found it from the corpse of a monster near Dawn Forest. I later bought it. I believe you know its value very well. How about it? This should be enough as a reward, right?" Zenobia gently pushed the life essence forward. "Dawn Forest? I see." Zhang Cheng nodded thoughtfully and picked up the green crystal to examine it carefully. As everyone knew, the evolution of life was a special substance born from the combination of natural energy and living creatures themselves. Not only was it a precious material for making all kinds of magic items, but it could also be used to make a potion that could slow down aging and extend life. Although this potion could only be taken once in a lifetime, it was still very tempting for many rich people. According to his understanding of Azeroth's history, Dawn Forest should be one of the 4 entrances to the real world from the Emerald Dream. It was not surprising that 1 or 2 monsters would occasionally run out. "How about it? Are you satisfied with this reward?" Zenobia asked nervously. "Perhaps a piece of life essence is precious, but it is not enough to pay for hiring me. You need to pay more." After saying that, Zhang Cheng put the life essence back on the table and looked up at the girl's pale face. He dared to swear that he was not the first person to be invited to this room, nor was he the first mage to refuse a deal. Zenobia seemed to have known that this would happen. After taking a deep breath, she gently unbuttoned her collar and belt. The robe slowly slid down her white skin, revealing a body that would make most adult men's blood boil. Chapter 306. Unbelievable. As a noble, you're willing to give up your superior status and identity to become a follower? Are you sure you understand the harsh terms of the follower contract? Zhang Qing narrowed his eyes and asked in a deep voice. A follower, as the name suggested, was a person who pursued and worshipped someone and was willing to follow the person's lead and do their best to achieve their goal. Generally speaking, there are 3 types of followers of mages. The first type was cooperative, which meant that the 2 parties did not have a clear primary and secondary relationship, but they had the same goal. When there was a difference of opinion, they could go their separate ways at any time. The second type was mercenary, where mages paid to hire apprentices, adventurers, and mercenaries to explore ruins, capture rare animals, or protect themselves. They would usually sign a contract that would last from a few months to a few years. When the contract expired, they would naturally regain their freedom. Similarly, although there was a certain command and obedience relationship, they were still relatively equal in terms of social status. The hired had the right to reject the employer's excessive requests. As for the third type, it was equivalent to selling one's body or disguised slavery. The follower had to sign a contract with magical effects on a voluntary basis. Once the contract was signed, the follower's body, life, and soul no longer belonged to him, but to the mage he followed. The latter could order the former to do anything, including participating in dangerous experiments that could lead to death. The latter could not do anything to resist, or they would be punished painfully. It could be said that except for those unlucky fellows who had no other choice and needed the protection and help of powerful mages, not many people would choose to be the third type of follower, even if they were usually the mage's most trusted assistants and servants. Zenobia clenched her teeth and nodded. Of course, I know the content of the contract. You can think of it as a gamble. I bet everything that I have that you are a kind master, a mage with a bright future. Maybe one day you will even get the title of a great mage and walk into the 6-member ruling council to become one of the highest rulers of the Magic Kingdom. Ha ha, well said. Using your life as a bargaining chip to make a huge gamble. Your courage and daring are admirable, Miss Eberlock. But the question is, why do you think I will accept you? Zhang Cheng laughed and asked. He originally thought that she was just a young girl with some schemes, and a little warning would be enough. But now, it seemed that things had become a little more interesting. Why not? I am the daughter of a noble of the Storm Kingdom. Obtaining me will not only elevate your status, but will also bring you countless conveniences and benefits. In addition, I'm also an outstanding apprentice. Whether it's alchemy, magic theory, or magic practice, I've obtained very good results. Perhaps I'll be able to pass the examination in a few years. With all due respect, you have no reason to refuse. From the initial nervousness and shame, Zenobia seemed to have gradually let go of her mentality. She even stopped covering her body with her arms and openly displayed her impressive figure. Even though she only had 2 pieces of undergarments, she still exuded the arrogance and confidence unique to nobles. Zhang Cheng shook his head and explained, from the perspective of benefits, accepting you would have many benefits. But there's a problem. All your assumptions are based on Duke Eberlock's ability to protect Nighttown. Think about it. If Nighttown no longer exists, will the nobles of the Storm Kingdom care about a family that has lost its territory? No, they won't. They will desperately mock, ridicule you, just like they did to the exiled nobles of Lord Darren Kingdom. But didn't you agree to help deal with the undead entrenched in Crow Ridge? Zenobia trembled, and her face suddenly became a little pale. No, miss, I haven't agreed to anything. To be exact, we are still negotiating, and the bargaining chip in your hand doesn't satisfy me very much. Zhang Cheng raised the corner of his mouth and hinted meaningfully. This is the limit of what I can provide. Your Excellency, please have mercy on the civilians living in Nighttown, or they won't be able to hold on for long. Zenobia knelt on the ground and begged bitterly. Zhang Cheng raised his hand and pinched the girl's delicate chin and said in a low voice, I can agree to your request, but there is an additional condition, and that is to convey what we just discussed to Jenny and let her understand the truth hidden under your mask. I don't understand. Zenobia's eyes widened, and her hands clenched tightly into fists. It's very simple. I want her to understand the sinister nature of the human heart and understand that the nobility and inferiority of the secular world do not apply in the world of magic. The only thing that can distinguish the status of people here is knowledge and power. Zhang Cheng gently stroked the girl's delicate skin and explained, Why do you care so much about her? Do you love her like the rumors say? Zenobia resisted the strong sense of humiliation and asked loudly. She didn't understand at all how she couldn't compare to a merchant's young daughter. Why was little Ginny able to gain the protection of the opposite party, while she was ignored? Love? No, I don't love anyone. I only love myself. Zhang Cheng's tone revealed a trace of self-mockery. and his eyes became incomparably deep. My important business partner, Old George, hopes to bring the family to a higher level in his lifetime. To do this, little Jenny must bear the corresponding responsibilities and obligations. First of all, she must break her original respect and fear of nobles, and you are a good example of what not to do. You must know that friendship is a very strange thing. To maintain it, you must ensure the most basic trust. Once someone finds out that their most trusted friend has been lying to them, guess what will happen? This friendship will quickly turn into disgust and even hatred. Coupled with your noble status and humble attitude in front of me, it is enough for little Jenny to understand a lot of things. Now put on your clothes and go. Do what you need to do, and then I will help you get rid of the undead in the great tomb of Raven Ridge. As you wish, Your Excellency. Zenobia realized that it was useless to say more. She could either agree to the additional conditions or choose to refuse and watch the family walk towards destruction. Very good. Remember, from now on, you're my servant. I'll make up for it with a follower contract later. After saying that, Zhang Cheng stood up, completely ignoring her extremely seductive kneeling posture. He grabbed the life essence in the wooden box and walked out of the room without looking back. Chapter 307. Late at night, the sky above Dalaran was suddenly covered by dark clouds. Not long after, raindrops began to fall. Due to the protection of the magic barrier, before the rainwater could fall to the ground, it was separated by an invisible field and scattered in all directions. If one were to observe from the outside, they would see a huge violet semicircular cover that completely isolated the magic city from the outside world. Jenny, who had just finished her alchemy class, was standing at the door of the house. She seemed to have lost her soul and did not reach out to push the door open for a long time. Her mood was like the weather, full of depression and pain. As a kind-hearted little girl, she had never thought that the relationship between people could be so complicated and so dark. Even the only friend she acknowledged had purposely gotten close to her, and had even done something that she could not understand. She had willingly given up her noble identity and became a lowly mage's follower. In her education since she was young, nobles were naturally superior to commoners. They were the legal rulers of the human world, and every commoner should be polite and humble when they saw a noble. But now, everything seemed to have been turned upside down, especially Zenobia's betrayal, which made the girl feel stuffy and painful in her chest. It was as if something important had left her and would never return. Jenny stood foolishly in front of the door for more than 10 minutes before she came back to her senses. She gently pushed the door open and entered the living room. But before she could put down the textbook and notes in her hands, she heard a familiar voice ring in her ears. "You're finally back, Mr. Mage? You haven't rested yet?" The girl almost jumped up in fright. "Of course, because I have to give you the most important lesson today. How can I sleep early?" Zhang Cheng raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Instantly, the candlesticks on the table immediately lit up, dispelling the darkness in the living room. Based on the magical power he currently possessed, lighting the candles on their own was as easy as eating and drinking. "Class!" Jenny's eyes widened, her face full of doubt and confusion. "Yes, class." Zhang Qing nodded with a serious expression. "You should know that almost everyone who comes to Dalaran to learn magic has a strong purpose and desire. Some of them came here for the endless knowledge, some to explore the unknown areas of the world, some to obtain great power, and some just to get a bottle of love potion and live with the person they love forever. Now tell me, why did you learn magic?" I don't know." It was obvious that the girl had never thought of such a question. She lowered her head and answered weakly. "That's right. You don't know. To be exact, you don't have a clear goal. The reason why you're here to study magic is because of your father's arrangement, not because of your own will. That's because you've never seen the other apprentices as your competitors. That's why you've been taken advantage of by those with ulterior motives." Zhang Cheng pointed out the little guy's psychological state. "What about you? Why do you want to learn magic?" Jenny raised her head and mustered her courage to ask. "For power. In order to surpass. With power, one would not be easily manipulated by others. Only by surpassing oneself could one achieve true evolution. I don't have any confusion or hesitation in my heart. Any obstacle that stands in my way would be eradicated by me without hesitation. Even my blood relatives are no exception. But you don't have such awareness. All right, today's lesson will end here. Think about it when you're free. What do you desire, and what price are you willing to pay for it? After saying that, Zhang Cheng stood up and went into the basement, intending to continue his unfinished experiment. His time was tight, and he couldn't waste too much time on a little girl. Today, he'd only come forward to give her some advice because old George had worked hard to earn gold coins for him. As for whether it would be of any use, it would depend on little Jenny's choice. At the same time, in the depths of the Alterac Mountains that were covered in snow all year round, an efficient massacre had just ended. The white snow was splattered with crimson blood, and corpses were strewn all over the ground. There were small, green-skinned goblins, as well as monster mercenaries such as ogres, orcs, trolls, and so on. Judging from the wounds on their bodies, they were all killed by a single blow. Most of them didn't even have time to react before they breathed their last. These seemingly powerful warriors were as weak as babies in the face of the meticulously planned assassination by MI7. More than 20 humans in white cloaks were quickly cleaning up the scene of the battle. They dragged the corpses and useless things to the side and buried them with snow. However, the black boxes on the sleigh were left intact. After everything was settled, one of the assassins came to Matthias Shaw and asked in a low voice, "Leader, it's all done. There's a Frostwolf clan camp 10 kilometers away from here. Do you think we can proceed with the last step of the plan?" "Of course, but I don't need you. I'll handle it myself. Remember, set up the scene so that those brainless orcs can tell at a glance that this was done by the Forsaken." After saying that, Matthias Shore began to merge with the surrounding environment, slowly disappearing into the vast expanse of white snow. 10 kilometers might take an ordinary person 1 to 2 hours, but for a bandit who had undergone strict training, 10 minutes was enough. When he saw the wall built with wooden rafts in the distance, a cruel smile appeared on his face. He slowly took out the test tube that was emitting a strange light from his pocket and muttered to himself, "My dear little mage, please don't disappoint me." As soon as he finished speaking, the master assassin nimbly flipped over the 2-meter-tall wooden wall and silently snuck into the orc camp. His movements were so light that even the silver-white Frostwolf guarding not far away did not notice anything. The orcs who were completely unaware of the disaster were still sitting in 2s and 3s in front of the bonfire, eating the meat of some unknown animal while talking about the dwarven expedition team that had appeared recently. Matthias Shaw went into a tent, took out his beloved dagger, and stabbed it into the back of the neck of an unlucky orc who was sleeping soundly. Poof! As expected, the beastman was killed without making a single sound. Following that, he used the same method to kill all the other 20 orcs in the tent. Then, he mixed the plague potion in the test tube with the black sticky substance in the clay jar and placed it in the center of the tent. He covered his nose and mouth and retreated outside, silently watching the black smoke spread. Just when Matthias Scholl thought that he would have to wait for a while to see the results, a series of rustling noises suddenly came from the lifeless tent. Chapter 308. As it happened too suddenly, the orcs beside the bonfire did not even have time to react before they were slashed to the ground. Their ugly heads with 2 long fangs were separated from their necks and rolled to the side. They did not even understand why their tribesmen wanted to kill them. But it was a pity that no one could give a correct answer except for Matthias Shore, who was hiding in the corner. In just a few minutes, more than 20 orc warriors who had come back from the dead had caused a huge panic and chaos in the camp. The reason for the panic was that these guys would not fall or die no matter how serious their injuries were. Some of them even lost their heads, but they were still crazily waving their axes to kill. Even a stupid idiot could see that the scene in front of them was definitely not normal. Damn it, who can tell me what's going on? A tall orc wearing a snowman's skin cloak walked out of the tent and asked loudly. Centurion Garen, a few of our brothers suddenly went crazy for no reason. They are killing everywhere. Another orc warrior hurriedly explained. What? The Centurion named Garen, subconsciously tightened his grip on his beloved war hammer as he stared at the bloody scene not far away. As an experienced warrior, he did not even need to think to know that there was something wrong with those green-skinned orcs, because these guys did not defend themselves at all during the battle. They were completely in a stance of exchanging lives for lives. It should be known that even the orcs who went berserk after drinking the demon's blood would carefully guard their vital parts. To a warrior, defense was often more important than offense, because only by surviving could they enjoy the joy and glory of victory. "Centurion, hurry up and give the order. If this continues, our camp will be finished," a shaman reminded loudly. Although shamans were the spiritual leaders and spiritual sustenance of the orcs in the tribal camp and had a very high status, they were still ranked below the chief and even the military commander in terms of power. Unless they were like Great Chief Sar, who was both a spiritual leader and a military commander at the same time. Garen undoubtedly knew that the longer the chaos lasted, the harder it would be to clean up. So after hesitating for a moment, he ordered in a heavy tone, "Kill them. Hurry up." Yes, most of the orc warriors were straightforward and were not good at thinking too much. After receiving the order, they immediately joined the battle and chopped their comrades who had come back from the dead into pieces with their advantage in numbers. Just when they thought that the sudden rebellion had been quelled, the corpses that had just died stood up for some reason and launched a frenzied attack on the living again. The fierce battle lasted for 7 to 8 minutes, and more than half of the less than 300 people in the camp were dead or injured. The rest were surrounded by more and more zombies. The shaman seemed to have sensed something as he sensed the growing death aura in the air. He shouted, "Not good. This wasn't madness at all. It's a plague. It's a magical plague from Scourge." Magical plague. Garen to Garen's face immediately. Although the Frostwolf clan, which was hiding in the depths of the Alterac Mountains, had successfully avoided the terrifying disaster that engulfed the Rotterdam kingdom, it didn't mean that they didn't know how terrifying the plague was, especially in the northern continent where the undead creatures wreaked havoc. It was simply a forbidden land for life. "You must break out immediately. Inform everyone in the Frostwolf clan of this news." The shaman gave his suggestion without any hesitation. After all, most of the members of the Frostwolf clan were scattered in various corners of the Alterac mountain range for survival. Otherwise, they would not be able to feed so many people. Now that something had happened, the only thing they could do was to inform them one by one as soon as possible and form an alliance to deal with the crisis. That was also the reason why the Thunderspear advance party could gain a foothold after entering the Alterac mountain range. The Frostwolf clan needed a long time to send the news before they could react. "Bastard, do you want me to be a coward who runs away?" Garen roared furiously. As an orc warrior who regarded death as the highest honor, how could he tolerate being a shameful deserter? Matthias Shore, who was hiding in the corner, saw this scene and realized that the time was ripe. He quietly took out a swirl-shaped dark blue gem. Instantly, his entire body began to change rapidly. In the blink of an eye, he changed from a human to a Forsaken. There was no doubt that the mysterious gem in his hand was no other than the famous Orb of Deception in the game. It allowed the wearer to change his race and appearance at will. As the leader of MI7 who often operated in the dark, Matthias Shore loved to use this gadget to create chaos and suspicion in the enemy's camp. There was no hesitation. He used his master-level stealth skills to get close to the target. He started with a standard sneak attack. The metal ball protruding from the back of the dagger hit the shaman's neck hard, causing the latter to fall into a strong state of dizziness. Then he stabbed the sharp end of the dagger into the shaman's jaw and killed him on the spot. The whole process was smooth. There was no chance for the opponent to react at all. Even the surrounding orc warriors were stunned. They could not believe that their spiritual leader was killed so easily. After the successful attack, Matthias Shore, who maintained the appearance of the Forsaken, let out a cold laugh. Then he sprinkled a handful of vanishing powder and disappeared without a trace in front of everyone's eyes. At this time, an orc warrior came back to his senses. With a face full of anger, he shouted, "It's the Forsaken. These damned undead have betrayed the tribe. Centurion, you must break out immediately and send the news to Ordramar. Great Chief, Thrall must know the true colors of the Forsaken. Leave this to us. Another orc warrior also patted his chest and agreed. I swear, your blood will not be spilled in vain. The Undercity must pay the price for its actions. The price of blood. After saying that, Serone stared with his two blood-red eyes and violently knocked over a resurrected orc corpse. He jumped onto his own frost wolf and rushed to the nearest camp. Chapter 309. Are you going to the Twilight Forest? Ansram Ruinaverver, who had just teleported back from Iron Furnace Fort, stared at the young man standing in front of him with a surprised expression on his face. The great mage couldn't understand why Zhang Cheng, who had never been interested in politics and power, suddenly chose to help the nobles of the Storm Kingdom. Yes, master. I want to use the undead in the Raven Ridge tomb to do some small experiments. Don't worry, it won't take too much time. Zhang Cheng replied with one hand on his chest and slightly bowed. He obviously didn't know that he had been targeted by the famous MI7 leader, Matthias Shaw. He was carrying out the predetermined plan step by step. That was to upgrade the mage profession template to the maximum level as soon as possible. Perhaps aware of his inner thoughts, the parchment suddenly issued a series of corresponding tasks 2 days ago. The final reward was also very generous. It was actually a mage robe. In the game of the 60s, this thing was one of the standard epic equipment for mages. Not only could it provide good intelligence attributes, but it could also greatly increase spell damage and critical hit. The key was that it could also store part of the energy and extract it when needed. As a mage who seriously lacked the support of equipment, how could Zhang Cheng let it go? Naturally, he had to get it first. As for the incompatibility of the appearance of the robe with the Earth's clothing, that was a problem that needed to be solved after getting it. Ansram Ruinaverver undoubtedly didn't believe this statement. He frowned and asked, Tell me, how are you going to deal with the large number of undead creatures entrenched in Raven Ridge? It's very simple. I'm going to try the method that the Forsaken are researching. Zhang Cheng smiled and said his plan. That's right. The reason why he was fearless and didn't put the tens of thousands of skeletons and ghouls in his eyes was that he had the latest research results of the Undercity Royal Pharmacist Association in his hand. He even carried out a series of experiments and improvements in the Song of Ice and Fire. At present, it was enough to have a fatal impact on low-level undead creatures. As everyone knew, undead creatures relied on death energy or negative energy to maintain their basic daily mobility. If one wanted to kill them, the most direct way was to make the death energy disappear completely. Priests and paladins relied on the Holy Light's ability to restrain death to deal great damage to undead creatures, especially spells like exorcism. The principle was to use the Holy Light to neutralize the death energy. When an undead creature lost the support of death energy, it would naturally lose its ability to move. However, the Forsaken led by the Dark Queen were different. They adopted another method to destroy the undead, and that was to constantly strengthen the original plague virus to exceed a certain limit. The essence of the magical plague was to convert life energy into death energy. Once the limit was exceeded, the process would not stop even after a living person became an undead. Instead, a special phenomenon called energy combustion would occur. At this time, the negative energy accumulated in the undead's body would be consumed at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, they would also gain increased speed, strength, and agility in a short period of time. Generally speaking, it was a bit similar to a stimulant with strong side effects, but the price was that after the excitement, the undead would lose a lot of negative energy to maintain their life form. For low-level undead, it was basically equivalent to a death sentence. In the near future, the Royal Pharmacists Association would develop a more advanced and powerful plague. Even Duke Bolvar for Dragon, the regent of Stormwind City, would not be spared. Although Zhang Cheng did not like this group of living dead who were blinded by hatred at all, he had to admire their outstanding achievements in pharmaceutics, or to be exact, in the study of the magical plague. The Forsaken? Damn it, you want to use the magical plague? Anslam Ruinviver's face changed dramatically, and his eyes were full of vigilance. He had once witnessed Kel Thuzad fall into depravity because of his obsession with psychic spells, and he joined the Lich King to establish the cursing sect to silently develop believers, which eventually led to a terrible disaster that swept across the Lordaeron kingdom. Naturally, it was impossible for him not to be vigilant against the young man who dared to try to study the magical plague. Zhang was not a fool. He saw the attitude of the Archmage at a glance, and calmly explained, "Yes, I plan to use the magical plague to get rid of the undead entrenched in the tomb of Raven Ridge once and for all. Maybe you think my idea is a bit dangerous, and studying the magical plague is an extremely dangerous move. But have you ever thought that with the addition of the Forsaken to the Horde, the world has actually been divided into two opposing camps? Next, the Alliance and the Horde will test each other around competing for land, resources, and strategic advantages, and a series of open and secret battles will break out. Do you think that after the Forsaken master the method of making the new plague, they will not throw it into the war? No, they don't have that much consideration. I promise that once the war is not good, they will definitely use the magical plague to reverse the situation. Therefore, in order to ensure that the Undercity will have scruples when using the magical plague, we must have the same destructive power. Only when both sides can ensure that they destroy each other will they choose to restrain themselves, and the peaceful situation can be maintained. There is no doubt that what Zhang Chang said was the strategy adopted by the nuclear powers on Earth after the development of nuclear weapons and intercontinental missiles was successful. It was also applicable to the magic world. After all, Sylvana's true goal was to take revenge on the Lich King. She was only fighting against the Alliance to protect her own territory. If she found out that the Alliance also had her secret weapon of mass destruction, then she wouldn't dare to use it in a normal battle. Otherwise, the Alliance could have sent a large number of undead to the Undercity. At that time, there was no need to talk about revenge. The Forsaken might even be removed from Azeroth. Ansram Ruinwilver narrowed his eyes and seemed to be savoring the words just now. After a few minutes, he breathed a sigh of relief and nodded with a serious expression. "Well, I admit that what you said makes sense. But the question is, how can you ensure that the plague will not be abused? And how can you ensure that the process of research will not hurt ordinary people? Please rest assured about this. I swear that I will never use civilians of the Alliance races for experiments. And I will also give the newly developed formula to the Council for safekeeping." After that, Zhangqing took out a few pieces of paper full of small words and a bottle of plague samples from his pocket. Because he knew that there was a bronze monitoring him, he did not intend to do plague research in Azeroth at all. He planned to go to other worlds to test it. "Very good. I will believe you for the time being. Remember, if I find that your behavior is out of line, you can imprison me or even kill me at any time." Chapter 310. How is it? Did His Excellency the Great Mage agree? As soon as Zhang Cheng returned to the hall of the Mage Tower, Zenobia, who had been waiting for a long time, rushed up and asked impatiently. Ever since she learned that the other party was going to use the magical plague to eliminate the undead, she had fallen into a state of tension and panic, fearing that Ansram Runwavar would refuse. After all, for the survivors of the Lordaeron Kingdom and Dalaran Kingdom, the undead scourge had caused too much pain and tragedy, and it would inevitably affect people's rationality and judgment. Well, His Excellency the Great Mage agreed. "Let's go. Now we can go to the teleportation room and find a mage who can open the portal to Stormwind City." Zhangqing obviously knew what the girl was worried about and nodded without thinking. Although, as an elite mage who was about to reach the upper limit of his profession template, he had long learned how to open a portal. The problem was that such a long-distance transmission required the help of external forces, which was the teleportation room located in the Mage District of Stormwind City. But the problem was that he had never been to Stormwind City, nor did he register to obtain the right to use the teleportation room. So he could only find someone who had been there for help. Is that so? That's great. I've found a mage who is willing to help open the portal. If you don't have anything to prepare, let's set off now. Zenobia did not care about maintaining her Leda-like image and dragged Zhangqing's arm in the direction of the teleportation room. Because she had not received any news from Nighttown for a long time, Her heart had long been filled with anxiety. She was afraid that when she returned to her hometown, she would not see her family and friends, but the undead and the devastation everywhere. After a while, the two passed through the secluded corridor and came to the door of the teleportation room. Before the mage on duty could say anything, a beautiful figure stood in front of him and greeted him in a rather playful tone. "Good afternoon. We meet again." "It's you." Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows in surprise. The person who came was none other than Varna Morgenstern, whom he had met not long ago. The beautiful and elegant high elf woman stroked her long silver hair and responded with a smile. "Of course. Other than me, who else in Dalaran would have the leisure to help a poor apprentice? Just help? Are there any additional conditions?" Zhang Cheng was not fooled by the other party's friendly attitude. Instead, he raised his guard. He wasn't the kind of idiot who couldn't control himself after seeing a pretty girl. He knew very well that this female elven mage must have an ulterior motive for approaching him again and again. So he had to be cautious. "Haha, don't worry, I'm just tired of staying in Dalaran, so I plan to go out for a walk and relax." "Why, am I not welcome?" Varna Morgenstern winked playfully. "No, of course not. Any man should feel honored to have a beautiful lady like you as his companion." Zhang Cheng pretended to be a gentleman and bowed. Although he didn't know what the other party was up to, he decided to observe for a while first. After all, it would be a waste not to take free labor, and he had nothing to lose. Moreover, the High Elves had always mastered many secret techniques, such as extracting arcane energy from the bodies of mana-floating dragons and creating the cores of arcane puppets. It would be wonderful if they could take the opportunity to extract a part of it. Varna Morgenstern obviously didn't know that someone was eyeing the knowledge in her head. She turned around and began chanting loudly. Not long after, the reinforced space between the portals began to slowly tear apart, forming a passage to the Stormwind Mage Tower. After about 3 to 5 minutes, the passage gradually stabilized. Varna turned around and smiled, then stepped in. Zenobia, who was burning with anxiety, followed closely behind. Zhang Cheng hesitated for a moment, then followed. After a strong dizziness, the three of them appeared in a slightly dim room almost at the same time. Two male mages in dark blue robes, one in front and one behind, guarded the only entrance. As someone who had experience in traveling between different worlds, Zhang Cheng acutely sensed that this was not Stormwind City. To be precise, it wasn't even Azeroth. It was an independent space created by someone. The mages had connected one end of the space to the portal and the other end to the Stormwind Mage Tower. This way, even if someone broke the protective spell and wanted to send a large number of troops over, they only needed to close the portal to Stormwind City, and a large number of enemies would be trapped inside. "You're from Dalaran?" One of the mages noticed the flashing light of the violet ring and took the initiative to ask. "That's right. Here, this is my permission to teleport." Varna Morgenstern didn't seem to want to talk nonsense, and directly showed a pendant with the symbol of a lion. The former cast an unknown spell, and after confirming the authenticity of the pendant, he immediately put one hand on his chest and bowed. "Welcome, Miss Varna. Please remember to remind your companions that all destructive spells are prohibited in the Stormwind City area. Relax, we won't stay here for too long. We'll soon depart for the night town." After saying that, the female elf led the way through the flickering dark green tunnel, and in less than 10 minutes, they walked out of the Mage Tower and entered the famous Stormwind City. Majestic city walls, tall towers, orderly rows of houses, and a wide moat that divided the city into pieces. Walking on the clean stone road, Zhang Cheng enjoyed the view of the human kingdom's capital with a population of more than 200,000 people. It had to be said that the stonemasons led by Edwin Van Cleef had built the city well. Whether it was for living, trade, or as a war fortress, everything was impeccable. It was no wonder that after knowing that he could not get paid, this man had resolutely started a rebellion and established the Phidia Brotherhood, occupying the western wilderness to fight against the nobles. If it were him, he would have gone overboard and even directly chosen to overthrow the ruling class of the Stormwind Kingdom. Of course, All the political darkness that was happening in the kingdom was the work of Countess Katrana Prester. This black dragon princess, who hid among the commoners, hoped to control Stormwind City through corruption, thus achieving her unspeakable goals. Unfortunately, no one had discovered this yet, and most of the nobles only saw her as a beautiful woman who was good at playing politics. As a passerby, Zhang Cheng didn't intend to interfere too much. He simply replenished some supplies in the trade area and flew southwest on the Griffin. Chapter 3:11. The sky was gray and overcast. The air was gray and gloomy. The entire sky above Night Town seemed to be shrouded in dark clouds that would never dissipate. Torches and braziers were lit even before sunset. Otherwise, one would not be able to see anything 20 or 30 meters away. What was more interesting was that the air here seemed to be filled with an ominous aura, and all kinds of energy, including arcane magic, were abnormally active. Varna Morgenstern was keenly aware of this. She turned around and asked in a low voice, "Do you feel it?" "Yes, of course." Zhang Cheng nodded gently, and at the same time looked at the headwind path that led to the Swamp of Sorrows. If he remembered correctly, the culprit behind the strange situation in Twilight Forest was neither the undead of Raven Ridge, nor the ogres or the werewolves. It was the home of the last guardian, Medivh, a tower called Karazhan. It was said that after Lothar and Khadgar killed Medivh, who was controlled by the Dark Titan, a terrible curse fell on Sargeras. Since then, with Karazhan as the center, it began to spread in all directions. Now, the headwind path had become gloomy and desolate, and there were strange rocks and trees everywhere. From time to time, the sound of ghosts crying could be heard. In contrast, although Twilight Forest was also severely affected, the soil was not completely rotten, and some plants and animals could still survive. "How about it? Do you want to investigate?" Varna Morgenstern asked with a smile. Zhang Cheng rejected without hesitation. "Sorry, I'm not interested. My task is to clean up the undead in Raven Ridge. The rest has nothing to do with me." Investigate Karazhan in the Headwind Path? As long as there was something wrong with anyone's brain, they would not agree to such a suicidal move. It was important to know that Medivh was the last guardian of Tirisful, and at the same time, the most powerful spellcaster in Azeroth. He even had the power of a demigod. The magic protection he set up was so strong that even the archmages of Dalaran would have to kneel down and surrender. Not to mention the messy monsters inside, such as ghosts, arcane golems, nethervoid dragons, nightmares, Prince Moxer of the Burning Legion, and so on. None of them were easy to deal with. Perhaps in the eyes of many players in the 70s, Karazhan was just an entry-level dungeon, and its difficulty was almost negligible. However, in reality, there was no clear level division at all. Whether it was the Black Dragon Princess Onyxia or Illidan in the Dark Temple, there was not much difference in terms of danger. Before obtaining overwhelming power, Zhang Cheng would not touch these bosses. To be more precise, he did not even plan to get close to them. "Are you sure? What if there's a powerful magical item or even a divine weapon behind these abnormal phenomena?" Varna Morgenstern obviously did not give up. She continued to tempt him. "Madam, if you're interested in this, please investigate it yourself. I have more important work to do, so I won't disturb you any further." After saying that, Zhang Cheng did not care about the frozen expression on the other party's face at all. He strode forward to meet a few strangers not far in front of him. After all, the commotion caused by riding a griffin from the sky was not small. When the Sentinels discovered it, they immediately sent the news to the Lord. One should not think that griffins were a public transportation tool that could be used casually by paying a few silver coins like in the game. On the contrary, without some social status, ordinary people would not even be able to touch a single strand of hair. No matter what, griffins were the backbone of the Alliance's air force that they were proud of. Every single one of them had to undergo strict selection and training from hatching to adulthood. Even with the financial resources of the Stormwind Kingdom, they could barely raise 300 to 400 of them. From this, one could see how precious they were. This time, they were only able to rent 3 of them because of the Kirin Tor Council. Otherwise, they would not even be able to ride on the Griffin Gate. Uncle, father, Althea. Zenobia obviously recognized the other party. She was overjoyed and rushed forward to hug them one by one. After a short reunion, she immediately calmed down her excited heart and pulled one of the middle-aged men in a black suit to introduce. Uncle, this is Sir Mage that I invited from Dalaran to solve the problem of the undead in Crow Ridge. Although he is young, he has already gained the trust of the great mage, Ansram Ruiniverver. Hello, young mage. I am Duke Elro Eberlock. The two beside me are my brother, Baron Carlton, and my daughter, Althea. Thank you very much for helping us solve the problem of Crow Ridge. Elro Eberlock took the initiative to bow and salute. Please don't mention it, Sir Duke. Your niece has already paid enough. If you have no other orders, please arrange a guide for us as soon as possible. I hope to settle this matter within 3 days. Zhang Cheng did not beat around the bush and straightforwardly made a request. Since the sky above Twilight Forest was shrouded in a gray fog, it became an impossible task to fly over on a griffin. Crow Ridge was not like Night Town, where many torches and braziers were lit and could be identified from afar. It would not be long before one would be completely lost after flying for a while. It was impossible to determine the position from the sky. One could only use the most traditional method of walking or riding a horse. Duke Elro Eberlock undoubtedly did not expect the young man standing in front of him to be so anxious. He did not even intend to exchange a few pleasantries and wanted to set off immediately. However, he looked up at the sky and quickly responded with an embarrassed expression. I'm really sorry, Sir Mage. Although I admire your swift and decisive action, it will be dark in less than an hour. I'm afraid no guide will be willing to follow you out of Night Town. What do you mean? Zhang Cheng frowned subconsciously. The literal meaning. Once night falls, all sorts of terrifying monsters will emerge from Twilight Forest. Giant spiders, wolves, ogres, and recently, there have been rumors of bandits roaming around the abandoned farms in the west. If you're unlucky, you might even encounter tigers and leopard from Stranglethorn Vale. As for the areas near Crow Ridge, it's even more rampant with the undead. Leaving the town is equivalent to suicide. I suggest that you rest for the night and continue your journey tomorrow morning. Althea, who was wearing black scale armor, explained. That's all. Zhang Cheng looked up expressionlessly at her, his tone revealing a hint of disdain. Perhaps these beasts and monsters were a little dangerous to normal people, but they were nothing in the eyes of an elite magus. Most importantly, he did not intend to waste too much time here. After he was done, he still had to make a trip south to Stranglethorn Vale. Damn it, what a hateful guy. Chapter 312. At Zhang Cheng's insistence, after about 10 minutes, a temporary team left Night Town and headed northwest. To ensure safety, the commander of the night watchman, Althea, personally led the team and selected 6 good men for fear of encountering any unexpected situations. Although she was disgusted by Zhang Cheng's stubbornness and arrogance, she had no choice but to set aside her personal prejudice when she thought of the increasing number of undead creatures gathering around Crow Ridge. At the very least, mages had a far greater advantage than warriors in dealing with a tide of undead creatures. Watching the team gradually disappear at the town's exit, Duke Elro Eberlock subconsciously clenched his fist and asked his brother without looking back, Carlton, do you think this young mage can succeed? I'm not sure. I only know that Zenobia voluntarily gave up everything to become a follower in order to invite him. If he can't deal with the undead at Raven Ridge, then I swear I won't let him leave Night Town alive, Carlton said as he tightly gripped the hilt of his longsword. Ever since he learned of the so-called price his daughter had paid, he wished he could immediately cut down the other party. But for the sake of Night Town, for the sake of his family's glory not to end in this generation, he could only choose to endure. However, this kind of patience was not limitless. If Zhang Cheng could not fulfill his promise, his accumulated anger would erupt like a volcano, venting it all at once. Calm down. Don't do anything stupid. Dalaran's Kirin Tor Council is not something we can afford to offend. Duke Elro Eberlock frowned and reminded him. Although he sympathized with Zenobia, who had made a huge sacrifice for the sake of the family, he even sent his own daughter to the forefront of the fight against the monsters, almost losing her life several times, not to mention his niece. Carlton knew what his brother wanted to express and responded with a sneer, "Don't worry, I'm not stupid enough to do it myself. Don't forget, Raven Ridge is less than an hour away from the Western Wilderness. The occasional appearance of a few assassins from the Fedia Brotherhood is not worth making a fuss about, is it? Damn it, you actually got mixed up with those stonemasons who started the rebellion." Duke Elo Ebelok suddenly opened his eyes wide and questioned sternly, "Why not? I believe you can feel it too. I don't know what's going on in Stormwind City, but their control over the surrounding areas is constantly weakening. Whether it's the Western Wilderness, Lakeside Town, or Twilight Forest, they have to rely on their own strength to deal with the crisis. Maybe we can take this opportunity." Before Carlton could finish his words, Elro angrily interrupted, "Shut up. House Ebelok is a noble of the Stormwind. Must be loyal to the king. Promise me. Cut off all contact with Edwin Van Cleef at once. Have you forgotten who you are?" "No, I haven't. Quite the opposite. The one who has forgotten is the Kingses. It's the guy in Stormwind. Look at what they have been doing recently. You allowed the Fedia Brotherhood to occupy the Western Wilderness and watched as the Blackstone Beastmen continuously harassed Lakeside Town. As for the situation in the Twilight Forest, you should be the clearest about it. Of all of you, how many letters Knights of the Night, Kingdom, Vase Ridge, Knight to Knight of the Town?" Carlton, who had accumulated a bellyful of resentment, couldn't help but vent it all out. Compared to his brother, who had silently endured it, his character was more impulsive. Coupled with the fact that he had suppressed it for too long, he began to develop strong feelings of dissatisfaction with the Stormwind Kingdom. "Bastard!" Elo Ebelok raised his arm and gave his brother a hard slap. The Duke was so angry that he was about to go crazy. His whole body was trembling, and he couldn't believe that his younger brother was the one who said those outrageous words. Feeling the burning pain on his face, Carlton clenched his teeth without saying a word. He turned and disappeared through the door of the only inn in town, seemingly planning to get drunk. At the same time, Zhang Chung, who was in Night Town, also encountered the first wave of obstacles. To be precise, there were about 50 to 60 low-level undead creatures wandering by the roadside, skeletons. These human skeletons, driven by death energy, seemed to be able to sense the aura of the living. They appeared from all directions and blocked the path of the team, looking at the surrounding undead creatures with strange light in their eye sockets. Althea hurriedly drew her long sword and shouted, "Remember to maintain a tight formation. Do not be afraid or retreat. Otherwise, we will all die." "Damn it. I bet they must have come from the Rotten Orchard." A night watchman cursed in a low voice. "Rotten Orchard?" Zhang Chung stroked his chin with interest, not a trace of panic on his face. Not only did he not, but Varna Morgenstern and Zenobia also did not. The reason was simple. For wizards, the number of enemies was never a threat. What truly threatened them was the quality of their enemies. Those who could resist large-scale destructive spells and rush to the front to break through their magical defenses. As for a group of mindless low-level undead, even an apprentice with some strength would not take them seriously. In fact, when Death Knight Arthas led his undead army to attack Dalaran, he was once blocked outside the Violet Barrier by an overwhelming amount of magic. If not for Frostmourne giving him enough power, he would have been wiped out before he could get what he wanted. The Night Watchman, who had never left Twilight Forest, did not know the horror of wizards. He quickly smeared holy water on his sword and replied without raising his head, "Yes, the Rotten Orchard." Some time ago, someone reported that a large number of undead creatures had gathered there. But we have too few people and do not dare to act rashly. Jerry, stop complaining. Get ready for battle. I don't want to die in this unlucky place. Another night watchman rolled his eyes in annoyance. It could be seen that although the night watchmen were very nervous, they did not appear to be too flustered. They were obviously veterans who had experienced many battles. They held hardwood shields in one hand and long swords smeared with holy water in the other. They formed groups of 2 and surrounded the 3 wizards in the middle. Althea did not forget to remind him in a low voice, "Sir Wizard, please do not move around casually. We will protect your safety." "Protect me?" Zhang Cheng could not help but laugh when he heard this. As he laughed, he asked in return, "Madam, what do you think wizards are? Weak and sickly people who can't even stand a gust of wind? No, the power we have is beyond your imagination. Tell your men to stand down. I only need a few minutes to clean up the skeletons." Chapter 313. Oh, this level of agitation isn't good. Varna Morgenstern could feel a powerful spell forming rapidly, and she hurriedly cast a flame protection barrier on herself. Even though she was not sure what kind of fire spell could cause such a strong magic resonance, she knew that once this spell was released, it would definitely be powerful. As it turned out, this female high elf mage's judgment was correct. Just as the ring of fire was formed, a glaring bright flame soared into the sky. The scorching flames completely engulfed the area with a diameter of more than 40 meters. Be it the skeletons, flowers, or trees, they were all turned into ashes in the flames. Even the rocks showed signs of melting. The heat wave that hit them in the face was suffocating. They couldn't stabilize their bodies even after retreating 2 to 3 meters. The night watchers endured the discomfort and stared at the hellish scene in front of them with their mouths agape. They could not believe that the power of magic could be so terrifying that more than 80% of the undead were wiped out in a single blow. Is this the power of magic? Althea muttered to herself as she held her long sword tightly, her whole body trembling uncontrollably. She could not help but tremble. Even if the night watchers were to move out collectively, it would take a lot of effort to clear out 50 to 60 skeletons. But now, a few seconds of chanting and a spell, and they were all done. For the first time, she began to doubt if she had made the wrong choice when her father asked her to choose whether to go to Dalaran to learn magic or to stay and command the militia in the territory. As for Zenobia, she was so excited that her face had turned red. She held the low-level staff that symbolized her status as an apprentice tightly. She had signed a follower's contract that could not be reneged on. The stronger her master was, the brighter her future would be. This flame storm was 4 to 5 times stronger than normal, be it in terms of range or power. As the only person in the team who could remain calm, Varna Morgenstern bent down and gently blew into Zhang Cheng's ear. She tried to sound him out with a seductive voice. "Dear, if you don't mind, can you tell me how you did it?" "I'm sorry, madam. This is a secret. If you are interested, you can ask Grand Mage Anselm Ruinvawal. Also, can you please keep some distance? I don't like people getting too close." Zhang Cheng turned around and stared at the other party's eyes that were flashing with violet light. His entire body was emitting a dangerous aura. As a mage, he knew better than anyone that mages were often at their weakest when they were focused on casting spells. In addition, they would subconsciously feel insecure, so they were always extra vigilant. If it wasn't for the fact that the female elven mage didn't show any signs of hostility, he would have chosen to strike first when she was within a meter of him. Without a doubt, Varna Chinga noticed the impulse to attack hidden under the calm surface. She quickly took a few steps back and comforted him with a smile. "Relax, don't be so nervous. I promise that we won't become enemies or rivals." "Is that so? Before I confirm your true intentions, I've decided to reserve my attitude." Zhang Cheng calmly rejected the olive branch offered by the other party. Because the conversation between the two of them was quick and soft, the others around them did not notice anything unusual before it ended. Coming back to her senses, Althea put away her weapon and turned around. She placed a hand on her chest and performed a standard aristocratic salute. "I apologize for my previous words, sir. Zenobia is right. You are a powerful and wise mage. Please help us get rid of the undead entrenched in Crow Ridge. If you can do that, I'm willing to pay you a special reward." "Oh, what is it?" Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows with interest. "It's a book. A few months ago, a group of adventurers who claimed to be hired by the Violet I went to the Headwind Trail to investigate Karazhan. They happened to pick up a book that was filled with messy runes. No one could understand it. In the end, only one of the adventurers came back alive with serious injuries. He died in his hotel bed in less than a week. Trust me, you won't be disappointed with this book. Althea promised. The Violet Eye. Then I'm really looking forward to this book. Zhang Cheng's lips curled up into a meaningful smile. Perhaps others did not know what kind of organization the Violet Eye was, but he knew that the Violet Eye was actually a secret organization under the Kirin Tor Council of Dalaran. They were responsible for monitoring Medivh and Karazhan to prevent things from spiraling out of control. In the game, this organization had appeared as a neutral party, requesting players from both camps to enter Karazhan to investigate the various strange events that had happened there. Since they were hired by the Violet Eye, these so-called adventurers must have entered the Karazhan Tower. At the very least, they must have searched the ruins outside the tower. Therefore, the book filled with messy runes was likely to be magical knowledge that had been encrypted by Medivh. Its importance was self-evident. Thank you very much. You don't have to trouble yourself with the rest of the undead. Please leave it to us. With that, Althea shouted at her subordinates. Brothers of the Night Watch, it's time to show your bravery and fearlessness. Go. Kill all the undead. Clear the obstacles for the mage. Kill. Charge. Kill these damned skeletons. Long live the Night Watch. Accompanied by a roar of high morale, a few elite Night Watch swarmed forward. In a few minutes, the remaining skeletons were chopped into bone dregs. Since the skeletons were a pile of human bones, there naturally could not be any spoils of war. After resting for a while, the team once again set off on their journey, moving slowly along the continent. According to Zhang Cheng's plan, they would have to travel for at least another 4 hours. At midnight, they would find a relatively safe place to set up camp and rest. They would then continue their journey the next morning. It was important to note that crossing half of the Twilight Forest was not like in the game, where they only needed to run for 10 minutes to half an hour. Even if they were to ride a horse, it would take at least a day and a half to 2 days. They had to seize every minute and second. Perhaps the powerful flaming storm had intimidated the monsters hiding in the darkness, but the group did not encounter a second attack when it was close to midnight. After the experienced Night Watch Jerry found a relatively safe place, everyone could finally set up their tents and prepare to spend the night. To ensure their safety, Althea divided her subordinates into 3 groups, taking turns to be on guard. They would change shifts every 2 hours until dawn. How could Zhang Cheng sleep when he heard the horrifying howls coming from the forest from time to time? He quietly took out a bottle of well water from his pocket, intending to use it to recover the mana he had expended earlier. Chapter 314. Damn it, the energy in this godforsaken place is too active. For safety's sake, let's use well water. Zhang Cheng grumbled as he gently pulled open the wooden cork sealed with wax. He would never have dreamed that the Twilight Forest under the influence of Karazhan would be so strange. It was as if all the energy contained an unknown curse. Absorbing a little of it would cause intense psychological and physical discomfort, as if something terrifying was staring at him. Perhaps it was Prince Malkeser's doing, or perhaps it was the remnant will or soul of the Dark Titan Sardras after Medivh was killed. Anyway, it was best not to touch it. As a person who knew his own limits, Zhang Cheng never overestimated his willpower, nor did he think that he had the ability to resist the temptation of the Burning Legion's terrifying power, even if it was filled with evil and destruction. Just as he raised his head and poured the well water that emitted pure energy into his mouth, a black shadow suddenly entered the tent. The next second, he felt soft and moist lips blocking his mouth, followed by a nimble tongue that pried open his teeth and greedily sucked on the well water in his mouth that he had yet to swallow. Or rather, it was a mixture of well water and saliva. If that was all, Zhang Cheng would not have lost his composure to the point of being unable to react. What really made him dumbstruck was that this Night Raider seemed to have triggered some subconscious desire in the process of sucking. She directly took off her outer clothes and pounced on him, writhing with all her might, constantly letting out panting and moaning that made a man's blood boil. Zhang Qing already had a certain degree of magical addiction left in him. Every time he absorbed energy, his mind would be in a state of extreme excitement. Coupled with the incessant teasing by the other party, it was natural that he was like an erupting volcano that could not be stopped. The two of them did not even say a word as they entered a state of selflessness. The intense battle lasted for more than half an hour before it slowly subsided. I knew it. You must have uncontaminated well water on you. The Night Raider stroked her messy silver hair, not minding showing off her beautiful curves. There was even an expression of excitement and enjoyment on her face. Clearly, she was none other than the female high elf mage, Varna Morgenstern, who had accompanied him. You approached me for the water of the Sunwell? Zhang Cheng, who had recovered from his intense mental excitement, narrowed his eyes and questioned. At this moment, he no longer had the passion from before. All that was left was a high degree of vigilance and boundless indifference. According to the words used on the internet, he definitely belonged to the category of ruthless. Varna Morgenstern did not seem to mind the bad attitude at all. She gently stroked the man's naked chest. After a while, she smiled and nodded. Of course. Do you know how much pain my people and I have endured since the Sunwell was contaminated? I can guarantee that as long as you bring a few dozen bottles to Silvery Moon City, you will immediately receive countless gold coins, knowledge, and treasures. The beautiful elven ladies will also be willing to climb into your bed for a small sip of well water. How about it? Are you interested in working with me? Cooperation? Are you trying to test how much unpolluted well water I have? Zhang Cheng asked meaningfully. If you think so, then so be it. Don't tell me you haven't spied on the knowledge and wealth accumulated by the High Elves over thousands of years. Varna Morgenstern did not hide her desire for well water. She raised her head and looked into Zhang Cheng's eyes. Feeling the female elf's obsession with well water, Zhang Cheng could not help but shake his head with a smile. No, you don't understand. I can't provide too much at all, and I can't use it for a large-scale trade. I can't satisfy the entire Silvery Moon City, and I can't satisfy the remnants of Quel'Dorii like you. Then what about me? You can definitely satisfy me, right? Varna Morgenstern lay down and put on a very seductive pose. What can I get from satisfying you? Zhang Cheng completely ignored the female elf seduction. Since he had been discovered to have well water from the Sunwell, he did not mind using it to make a trade. However, the prerequisite was that the other party had to be able to give him something that he was interested in. Seeing that her seduction did not work, Varna Morgenstern quickly stopped her wanton behavior and lowered her voice. It depends on what you want. I have the special elven technique to absorb arcane energy, the method to make magic runes, and some special elven spells, such as making arcane puppets. As long as you can give me enough well water, I can give it all to you. And as an additional reward, I can also be your secret lover and ally. What do you think? Not bad, right? Admiring her fair skin and beautiful curves that human women could never have, Zhang Cheng immediately nodded after a moment of consideration. I have to admit, my lady, your offer is very tempting. But out of caution, let's start with the smallest share first. When we have enough trust in each other, we can slowly expand. Now, I'll give you 10 bottles of well water in exchange for the technique to absorb arcane energy. What do you think? 10 bottles? Varna Morgenstern's eyes lit up slightly. She then replied without hesitation, No problem. Now, please give me the well water, and I'll teach you the way to absorb arcane energy immediately. Although 10 bottles were like a drop in the bucket for a high elf who could never get rid of her magical addiction, Varna Morgenstern believed that if this young human could give her 10 bottles, he could definitely give her more. He might even have a small sunwell that could produce endless amounts of water. As a trader who was unwilling to follow Prince Kale, that's and absorb arcane energy to relieve her magical addiction, Varna Morgenstern did not care about the life and death of her fellow blood elves. She only wanted one thing, and that was to live a good life and continue to enjoy her long life and explore the profound knowledge of magic. That was all she wanted, In fact, most of the elves who kept the name of Quell Dorii had similar thoughts. Here are 10 bottles of well water. You can start teaching me the technique to absorb arcane energy. Without any hesitation, Zhang Cheng directly took out 10 bottles of well water that shone with arcane radiance and handed them over to Varna Morgenstern. Perhaps there was a certain amount of risk involved in this transaction, but he believed that the elven mage would do her best to keep this a secret for him. Otherwise, if too many people knew about this, the first one to suffer would definitely be Varna Morgenstern. After all, before the Sunwell was repaired, there would be no one else in the world of Azeroth who could provide untainted and pure well water. Oh my God, I can't describe my feelings at this moment. Dear Zhang, from today onwards, you are my savior, my true love, my only lover. Varna Morgenstern was like an addict. She tightly grabbed the test tube filled with well water and kissed, sucked, and licked. Chapter 3:15. As someone who had personally experienced the feeling of a magical addiction, Zhang Cheng knew very well how difficult the process was. If one were to measure it according to the classification of pain levels on the internet, then the magic addiction would definitely exceed level 12 and reach the level of directly attacking one's soul. Driven by instinct, the body's incomparable thirst for pure energy would cause the dam called rationality to collapse in just a few seconds. So Varna Morgenstern's bold and crazy actions were not worth making a fuss about. If someone had taken out a bottle of well water when the magical addiction was acting up in the Song of Ice and Fire world, he might have gone even further. In contrast, the female elf's desire for energy was just a subconscious desire to vent. It could be said that she could not restrain herself anymore. Just look at those lunatics in Silvermoon City who desperately sucked in all the magical energy that they could, and you would know how terrible the magical addiction was to the willpower of intelligent life. Especially when the blood elves sucked in a large amount of magical energy used by the Burning Legion, it directly caused the color of their pupils to change from the original beautiful violet to a strange dark green. Some of them even overdid it, and their appearance changed like the fell orcs. For example, their skin had a strange red color, and their surface was densely covered with various kinds of bone spurs. Of course, Zhang Cheng was not at all interested in Silvermoon City, which was destined to join the Horde camp in the future. He was only interested in the energy-sucking technique that Illidan had taught them. It was not a big deal to absorb energy. On the contrary, this technique was very versatile. It could absorb almost all forms of magical energy, be it arcane, holy light, elemental, nature, dark energy, shadow, death. In short, as long as the body could withstand it, they could absorb as much as they wanted. As for whether the energy would conflict and cause them to explode or go crazy, that was another matter. The reason why Zhang Cheng could not wait to learn this technique was mainly because he was interested in Kulo Kelba's ability to convert all forms of energy into arcane energy and store it in the body. Once he learned it, he could use the dragon as a large-capacity biological battery, and he would no longer have to worry about the problem of not being able to recover his magic power when he traveled to another new world. Of course, although the theory was not complicated, it was not easy at all to put into practice. Most importantly, he seriously lacked the incomparably delicate magic control that the High Elves possessed. Every time he drew, he would either use too much force or not enough suction force, unable to stabilize the energy transmission channel. Fortunately, he wasn't someone who gave up easily, and he wouldn't lose his confidence because of a little setback. After 2 days of traveling through the Twilight Forest, they were about to reach the Raven Ridge Catacombs. After hundreds of failures, he finally succeeded for the first time in extracting a small amount of death energy from a finger bone of a skeleton. Zhang Cheng's lips curled up slightly as he felt the cold and dark energy swirling around his palm. He muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Success. It seems that some plans can be put into practice." "What are you mumbling about?" Varna Morgenstern, who had been by his side, came closer and blinked her eyes curiously. Zhang Cheng smiled and shook his head. "No, it's nothing. I'm just praising Illidan's Stormrage for being the one who understands the Burning Legion demons the most. If I'm not wrong, The inspiration for this energy absorption technique should have come from the Hellhounds. It said that not only can they destroy the flow of magic in a spellcaster's body, they can also recover from their injuries by devouring spells. They're a very mysterious type of demon. Damn it, don't mention them in front of me. These fellows are the nemesis of mages, right? I haven't congratulated you yet. You should know that apart from the elves, it's impossible for humans to learn it. Yet, you've created a miracle and completed your first energy absorption in just 2 days. I'm starting to believe that you'll become the most outstanding spellcaster in Dalaran in the future. Varna Morgenstern's eyes shone with a strange light as she spoke. She didn't hide the admiration and amazement on her face. She had seen with her own eyes how Leyland's initial clumsy attempts had turned into proficiency and success. The terrifying speed of his improvement couldn't be described with words. After all, the elves had a long lifespan and weren't in a rush to study magic like humans. However, Zhang Cheng's dedication and focus far exceeded that of any human mage she had ever seen. Thank you for your praise. However, the future is too far away. Compared to looking forward to the future, I prefer to be down to earth and gain strength bit by bit. Also, I'm not sure if you've noticed, but the closer we get to Raven Ridge, the greater the proportion of death and shadow energy. Zhang Cheng looked into the distance as he spoke. Even though it was noon when the sun was at its brightest, the sky in front of them seemed to be fixed at midnight. There wasn't a trace of light in the sky at all, only endless darkness. Varna Morgenstern shrugged nonchalantly. Perhaps it's the effect of some dark magic, or perhaps it's some terrifying curse. Who knows? Anyway, I feel that with so many corpses coming back to life, we definitely need a powerful magical item. Hee. Let's conduct a small experiment then. Let's see if we can force out the culprit behind this. Zhang Cheng sneered as he reached into his waist pouch, grabbing a bottle of magic plague that had been specially modified. Before he could take out this dangerous little toy, Althea, who was walking at the front of the group, suddenly stopped and turned back to shout, "Sir Mage, we're here. Raven Ridge is right in front of us." Even though, according to the report 2 weeks ago, the houses that used to be inhabited by humans have no traces of the undead, I still think it's better to be careful. "What is your suggestion?" Zhang Cheng asked straightforwardly. "I think it's best to send someone to investigate." Before Althea could finish her sentence, a black shadow flashed through the window of one of the broken houses. "Be careful. Something's there. Could it be the undead?" The vigilant night watchers drew their weapons and prepared for battle. However, just as they were about to rush up and block the front and back doors of the house, a man wearing tattered linen clothes ran out from inside. As he ran, he begged weakly, "Food! Food! Give me something to eat. Anything will do. I'm starving to death." A living person? Althea was obviously shocked. She couldn't believe that there was actually a living person living less than 2 kilometers away from the tomb. Hungry. Food. The man's mind seemed to have been dominated by his primitive instincts. His eyes shone with a green light. One of the night watchers realized that the man was about to go crazy from hunger. He quickly took out a few pieces of bread and dried meat and handed them over. Chapter 3:16. Slow down. No one is fighting with you. We brought enough rations. Here, drink some water. Night Watchman Jerry was afraid that something would happen to the survivor in front of him, so he comforted him softly while opening his canteen to feed him 2 mouthfuls of water. He knew that people who were dizzy from hunger would sometimes die from being unable to control their excessive appetite, so he didn't give him too much food at once. After this sloppy-looking fellow finished 4 pieces of bread, half a caddy of jerky, and 3 apples, he finally licked his lips and sat down on the ground. With a bitter expression, he said, "Thank you. Thank you. Otherwise, in at most 2 or 3 days, I really would have starved to death." "No need for thanks. Tell me, who are you? Why are you living in this ghost town? Are you afraid of the undead entrenched in the great tomb of Crow Ridge?" Althea asked with a frown. "Me? My name is Kits. I was planning to go to Night Town to seek refuge. But who would have thought that I would meet a group of damned bandits on the way? They stole all my belongings and food supplies. As a result, I had no choice but to settle down in this damned ghost town. As for those undead, there is no need to worry. They never leave the tomb more than 200 meters away, as if there is something inside attracting them. The guy who called himself Kitz replied, while gritting his teeth. Althea nodded thoughtfully. All right, your experience is pitiful, but we are now carrying out a very important mission, so we can't spare anyone to protect you. So it's best if you continue to stay in the house and wait for us to return. No, please don't leave me behind. I know the situation of Crow Ridge. I can lead the way. Kitz immediately jumped up from the ground when he heard that he had to stay behind alone. After experiencing the ravages of hunger, loneliness, and fear, he would rather die than stay alone in an empty ghost town, especially since this town was originally a place for embalming corpses. From time to time, there would be eerie and terrifying sounds in the middle of the night, tormenting him to the point of insanity. Sir, what do you think? Althea hesitated for a moment before looking at Zhang Cheng. The latter smiled slightly and shrugged his shoulders indifferently. It doesn't matter. Just remember to bring a few cauldrons and enough water when you set out. Pot and water? Althea clearly did not understand the purpose of this. Zenobia, who knew the whole plan, trembled subconsciously. She knew that the pots and water were props used to spread the plague. The Calamity Army in the East and West Plague Lands relied on the continuous release of plagues from their giant pincers to cause irreversible changes to the ecological environment. Yes, remember to prepare more. When you're ready, we'll charge in. Zhang Cheng didn't explain anything. After giving the order, he found a relatively clean chair and sat down to recuperate. After all, even if they were to use the magic plague to kill a large number of undead, they would still have to enter the central area of the Raven Ridge tomb first. Then, they would have to set up a cauldron and let the plague spread out in gaseous form. In any case, a fierce battle was unavoidable. Varna Morgenstern, who had once participated in the battle against Arthas' invasion of Dalaran, also began to fiddle with various wands, staffs, potions, and tools. Although she was a typical academic mage who focused more on the study and research of theoretical knowledge and was not very good at fighting, dealing with a group of uncommanded low-level undead was not too much of a problem. After a short rest and looting, the group brought along 6 giant pincers and a cart full of water buckets. They mustered their courage and advanced in the direction of the cemetery. Before they passed through the gate, Zenobia could not help but gasp. She lowered her voice and exclaimed, "Holy light! How is this possible?" On the other side of the rusty iron fence, there were thousands of white skeletons densely packed together. They were like walking corpses, wandering aimlessly in the cemetery. Some of the shadow and death energy in their bodies were so dense that they could be clearly felt even from a few hundred meters away. Any mage with the slightest bit of common sense would easily be able to tell that this part of the skeleton had probably evolved into a corresponding spell-like ability. Dear, we plan to do. Charging in head-on is not a wise choice, Varna Morgenstern reminded softly. Perhaps dealing with a group of low-level undead that only knew physical attacks would not be a problem for a mage, but if they had evolved into a corresponding spell-like ability, it would be a different story. What, are you scared? Zhang Cheng raised his head, his eyes flashing with a crazy light. Damn it, are you crazy? Varna Morgenstern was undoubtedly shocked and quickly retreated. She couldn't believe that the usually calm and rational young man would suddenly become like this. Crazy? No, I'm not crazy. You don't understand. A truly powerful mage should not just hide in a mage tower and carry out endless research day and night. Instead, they should come out and turn the knowledge they have into battle power. Open your eyes and watch carefully. I will show you why mages are feared by ordinary people. After saying that, Zhang Cheng ignored the advice of Althea and the Night Watchers and opened the door and barged into the territory of the undead alone. Without a doubt, as undead, they were very sensitive to the signs of life of living people. They were so sensitive that not even half a minute after he stepped into the front yard, 200 to 300 white skeletons began to charge. As there was no command, the skeletons did not pay attention to battle tactics. They swarmed forward, ready to tear this reckless intruder into pieces. There were more than 10 skeletons that emitted abnormal energy. They even stopped when they were 30 to 40 meters away. Their 10 finger bones were crossed, and a thick black fog emerged. Hee, Shadow Arrow. Come, I'll use you to test my strength today. As soon as he finished his words, Zhang Cheng quickly raised the ice shield and flashed through the sea of skeletons, arriving directly beside the spell-casting skeletons. There was no hesitation. He held the pocket watch that could increase the power of elemental magic tightly, raised Jordan's staff high, and stabbed it into the ground, releasing the fire magic that he had just learned, Shockwave. Boom! Accompanied by a loud noise. Blinding flames spread out in all directions with the staff as the center. The impact of the scorching flames and the explosion forced the undead within a radius of a few dozen meters back by half a meter. Some of the more fragile ones turned into charred bones on the spot and scattered on the ground. Zhang Cheng had no intention of stopping after his successful attack. He raised his left hand that was emitting cold air and released the icicle spell. The high-speed spinning ice shards dealt a devastating blow to more than 60% of the undead in the cone. The skeletons shattered and disintegrated amidst the cracking sounds.